Wife contracts STD and ends up in hospital after infidelity with her boss is exposed. It was barely 8:45 a.m., but this Monday was already shaping up to be the worst one I'd ever had. I'd kissed my wife Marissa goodbye earlier that morning. She's been my partner for 15 years and is an incredibly successful real estate agent, judging by her impressive stack of commissions and bonuses. "You have a good day," she chimed in that overly polished realtor voice she knew I couldn't stand. Her smirk suggested she was holding back a secret, which only added to my irritation. On my way to the office, I couldn't stop thinking about the heap of reports due by the end of the month. I got in at my usual time, 7:45, dropped off my briefcase, and headed to the men's room for a quick coffee break. That's when everything went sideways. While at the office, I was suddenly overwhelmed by a sharp pain at the welcome, prompting a loud scream. My boss, Alan Randall, quickly came to assist, expressing deep concern. I described the burning sensation, and we both noticed the alarming greenish discharge. Alan immediately advised me to seek medical attention and reassured me not to worry about the pending reports, promising to handle them and suggesting I take the necessary time off. Grateful, I thanked him for his understanding and support, appreciating his compassionate approach during such a distressing moment. I splashed water on my face, grabbed my briefcase, and headed out the door. I told the receptionist I wouldn't be back for at least a day, maybe longer. Normally, I'd see my regular doctor, but his office was clear across town, and I doubted I'd get an appointment today. Instead, I opted for the urgent care just a few blocks from my office. Once there, they quickly took some samples and directed me to the waiting room. It felt like hours, but only 30 minutes passed before a nurse called out sharply, "Greg Watson." She gestured for me to come over with a look that made me feel less than human. Curious about her demeanor, I followed her to the observation room. "Have a seat, Mr. Watson," she instructed coldly. I sat down and watched as she took my vitals, blood pressure, temperature, the works, without much conversation. After jotting down the details, she mentioned, "The doctor will see you shortly," and left the room. Not long after, there was a knock on the door, and an older man in a white coat entered, holding a folder. "Mr. Watson, I'm Dr. Smith," he introduced himself. Sitting down, he opened the folder and didn't mince words. "Your tests show you have gonorrhea." I repeated, stunned. "Gonorrhea?" "Yes, it's a sexually transmitted disease," Dr. Smith said, giving me a look that suggested I should have known better. "I'll prescribe an antibiotic and you should avoid any sexual activity for at least 7 days. After you finish your treatment, if you still have symptoms, see your primary doctor." The news hit me like a truck, but Dr. Smith's straightforward manner helped cut through the shock. I nodded, processing the steps I needed to take next. He started by saying that other tests were ongoing and it could take a couple of weeks or more to get my results. He then asked for a list of people I'd recently been in contact with. "I've only been intimate with one person in my entire life," I told him. "My wife." He gave me a sad look for a moment before checking my chart. "If I got it from her, wouldn't she show symptoms?" I asked. "Not necessarily, Mr. Watson," he replied. "She might confuse them for something like a bladder or vaginal infection. It's important she gets checked soon. Waiting could lead to serious complications." "Excuse me, Mr. Watson," he said, handing me some medication and having me sign a few forms. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Watson, and make sure to follow up with your doctor," he advised as he left. Feeling a mix of emotions, I finished up and headed to my car. I called my boss to update him. "I'm sorry to hear that, Greg," Alan said. "Don't worry, your privacy is my priority. You'll take a leave and return when you're ready. I've taken care of your reports, so just focus on getting better." "Thank you," I replied, ending the call. Next, I had to talk to my parents, whom I never hid anything from. I hit their speed dial and my dad answered. "Hey son, are you at work?" he asked. "No, Dad, I'm dealing with a health issue and need to talk with you and Mom," I said. "Of course," he replied. "Are the kids okay?" "They're fine," I assured him, "but I'd rather not discuss this over the phone." "Come over then. We'll have coffee and talk," he suggested. We hung up, and I put away my phone, ready to face the next conversation. I should tell you a bit about my background. My sister Denise and I were raised in a very religious and loving family. Our childhood was filled with laughter and love, and although our parents were very much in love, they were also quite strict. One of the key rules in our house was no sex before marriage. Because of this upbringing, I didn't have sex until I married Marissa. While we were dating, I told her I wanted to wait until marriage. She responded with a big smile and a deep kiss, saying, "That's so sweet. I promise I'll rock your world on our wedding night." And she certainly did. It was an incredible experience, and she was patient and loving as she showed me how to make love in a way that pleased her. Eventually, I began to really enjoy our intimacy, and it seemed she did too. Marissa had been with others before me, but that didn't bother me as long as she was committed to our relationship. Not long after we married, she took a job at a busy real estate office while working towards her license. Our first daughter, Lisa, was born about a year into our marriage, followed by Ginger a year later. Marissa decided to have her tubes tied after Ginger's. Tough delivery, feeling that 2 children were enough. While I had hoped for a son, I couldn't have been happier with my daughters. Both became the light of my life, quickly turning me into a doting father. When Marissa went back to work after her maternity leave, I often found myself playing the role of Mr. Mom, especially when she worked late or had paperwork to catch up on. As the girls grew, I took them to their various activities, Lisa with her music lessons and Ginger with her sports, particularly when Marissa's work took her away in the evening. Over time, though, Marissa started to be away even more frequently, attending seminars and company retreats, sometimes over weekends or for an entire week. She always made sure to call us every night, but the increasing distance was hard. On top of everything, she developed an irritating fake persona that really got under my skin. I brought it up more than once, but she seemed committed to it. Her attitude toward work had shifted too, and I started to wonder if she was spending too much time there. Even our daughters began to notice the changes in their mom. Despite these issues, the thought of her being unfaithful never crossed my mind. She knew my strong stance on infidelity. One day I arrived at my parents' house and pulled into the driveway. My dad greeted me at the door with a warm hug and a pat on the shoulder. "We just finished the coffee. Come on in, and we'll make some more and talk," he invited. I walked into the dining room and gave my mom a hug before we sat down at the table. She poured us coffee and I added cream and butter pecan syrup to mine. Dad did the same, and we each took a sip. "Why don't we start with a prayer?" Dad suggested. Of course, I agreed. It was their way, prayer first, then conversation. After a few minutes of prayer, we got down to business. "What's wrong, son?" Dad asked. "I just came from the urgent care clinic." "I have gonorrhea," I said. "Oh my God," Dad responded quietly, always composed as long as he heard the truth. "Were you fooling around?" he asked after a pause. "No, Dad, never," I assured him. "Marissa is the only woman I've ever been with." He nodded. "I believe you, son. I just needed to hear you say it. What are you planning to do?" Mom chimed in. "I don't see any other option but to divorce her," I admitted. "It's going to be tough on the girls. They're old enough to understand," I added. "I can't just overlook this. Even if she promises it won't happen again, I can't trust her." "Do you know how long this has been going on?" Dad asked. "I just found out this morning," I replied. "Adultery is a clear ground for divorce," Dad said, getting up to go to his office. Mom looked heartbroken. "I'm so sorry this is happening, Greg," she said. "I always thought Marissa was such a wonderful woman." "Me too, Mom. It seems she fooled us all." Dad returned with his Rolodex, flipping through until he found a particular card. "There she is," he said. "You know Gina Hawkins, the family law attorney from our church?" I asked. "Yes, that's her." "Let me give her a call," he said. It wasn't surprising he had her card. As a deacon, Dad kept contacts from the congregation handy. He dialed and spoke to Gina's secretary before getting through to her. "Gina, hi, it's Dan Watson. Yes, from the church. Listen, I'm calling because my son could really use your help soon. He's facing a tough situation, and I think you could assist." "Oh, really? This afternoon at 12:30? That's perfect. I'll make sure he gets there." "Thanks so much, Gina." "I owe you one. Take care, and give your little one a big hug from us." "Okay, bye." After hanging up, Dad turned to me. "That was Gina. She can see you today at 12:30 thanks to a canceled appointment. Make sure you bring your financials and tax returns from the last 2 years," he informed me. "Okay," I said, realizing I needed to get my documents ready. "I guess I'd better head inside and pack my things." "That sounds like a good plan," Dad replied. "And you know you have to talk to Marissa about the STD. She needs to get tested as well to prevent any further spread." "Maybe the girls should stay with us for a bit," Mom suggested. "Things might get tense at home with everything going on." "You're right," Dad agreed. "Have them stay a few days until things calm down. Look, son, why don't you bring the girls over after school? We'll take care of getting them to school on time." "I will. Thanks, Dad," I said. We chatted a bit more before I got up to leave. Dad hugged me at the door. "It'll work out, son," he reassured me. "Just don't do anything rash. I know you're hurt and might want revenge on Marissa, but remember Romans 12:19, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay," says the Lord. Don't make me bail you out of jail. Think about your girls." I grinned. "No problem, Dad. I got it." I got back in my car and headed home. Dad was right about one thing. I did want revenge on Marissa and whoever else was involved. After over 15 years of loving her exclusively, this felt like the ultimate betrayal. When I arrived home, I started going through my files to find my old tax returns. I also needed to find Marissa's because about 8 years ago, she had suggested we file taxes separately to save money. Back then, it made sense, but when I looked at her tax forms, I discovered the real reason she wanted us to file separately. Marissa had earned much more in bonuses and commissions than I had realized. Seeing how much she had put into our joint bank account, I wondered where all her extra money had gone. My search led me to a folder full of bank statements from a bank I didn't recognize. The latest statement showed she had saved almost $1 million over the past 8 years. What was her plan, I wondered? Was this some kind of plan for when the kids went to college? I collected the statements and her tax forms, put them in my folder, and went to my car. Just as I was about to leave, my phone beeped with a text from Marissa. She said she would be late because of a showing and not to wait for dinner. Yeah, sure, I said to myself. I replied, no problem, see you when you get home. As I sent the message, I couldn't help but wonder if she noticed that I didn't say I love you like I usually do. I arrived at Gina Hawkins' office building, parked the car, and headed to her suite. As I walked in, I was greeted by an attractive blonde receptionist. I'm here to see Gina Hawkins, I told her. I have an appointment for 12:30. After a quick check on her computer, she smiled and led me to Gina's office. Gina stood to greet me, shaking my hand warmly. It's good to see you, Greg, she said, smiling. Would you like some coffee? That would be great, thanks, I replied. Gina turned to the receptionist. Could you bring 2 cups of coffee, please, and maybe some butter and nuts? Sure, the receptionist replied before leaving the room. She returned shortly with 2 cups and some butter portions. Gina motioned for me to sit, and I took a seat across from her. I was surprised to get a call from your father this morning, Gina began. So you're facing a problem that needs legal attention? Yeah, it looks like Marissa's been unfaithful, I said. I'm sorry to hear that, Gina responded, her expression sympathetic. I always thought you two were solid. So did I, but I guess I was wrong, I said. Can you tell me about my options? I explained the situation, including my visit to the clinic and the discovery of the bank statements earlier that day. Gina nodded thoughtfully. I understand how tough this must be, she said. Let me explain a bit about how divorce works here. It's not necessarily about justice, it often comes down to finances. In this state, we have no-fault divorce laws, but you can still file on grounds of adultery if you have strong evidence. What about the STD she gave me? I asked. Gina nodded. That's a strong point, she acknowledged, but her lawyer might claim you caught it from someone else. We know that's not true, but we need to convince a judge. Regarding the money she set aside, she could argue it was meant as a surprise for retirement. You don't really believe that, do you? I questioned. No, it seems more like an exit strategy, Gina replied. She's probably waiting for an opportune time, maybe after your daughters finish school, to leave without complications. Proving that in court, though, will be difficult. So I'm just out of luck, I pressed. Not necessarily, Gina reassured me. I can hire a private detective to investigate. It's pricey, but it could provide the solid evidence we need in court. Would you like to proceed with that? Yes, let's go ahead, I decided. Great, Gina responded. I'll need all the details you can provide, her car's make and model, license plate number, places she frequents. I pulled out my phone. Actually, I installed a phone tracker app when she lost her phone a few months back. Oh, let me check if it's still active. I opened the app and located her phone at a house on the north side of town. I showed Gina the address. Perfect, she said, jotting it down. I'll get in touch with my investigator right now. She made the call, giving the investigator all the details we had. After hanging up, she looked at me with a determined expression. We'll handle this as discreetly as possible, she assured me. Okay, we're all set. If there's something going on, we'll find out soon enough. Now, let's focus on your situation. You have 2 teenage daughters, Lisa and Ginger, ages 14 and 13, correct? Gina asked. Yes, that's right. They're not quite old enough to choose which parent they want to live with, but it's getting close. I want to seek custody, I confirmed. Understood, Gina nodded. You should know that courts typically favor the mother for primary custody. However, we can certainly make a case for you, especially given the circumstances. Who's been the main caretaker? Marissa often goes out in the evenings, so I've been the one at home, I explained. Got it. And just to clarify, are you certain the girls are biologically yours? She inquired cautiously. I believe so, yes. At this point, does it matter? My name is on their birth certificates and I've raised them since they were babies, I replied a bit defensively. I understand, Gina reassured me, but it might be good to know for sure. I can refer you to a lab for a paternity test if you'd like. Okay, I'll think about that, I said. What about the house situation? We don't have a mortgage. The house was my grandparents' and now it's in a family trust under my parents' names. They let us live there, I explained. Good, that simplifies things a bit. No mortgage issues to deal with, she noted. There will still be personal property and possibly other assets to consider dividing. I'll prepare a list of what you need to address. Is there anything else I need to do right now? I asked. Not at this moment, she replied. I'll start drafting the paperwork, but let's wait to see what the private investigator finds before we proceed too far. However, go ahead and complete the checklist I give you. Do you think I should confront her about this personally? I wondered aloud. But it might be wise to at least inform her that she needs to get tested for STDs to prevent any further spread. It's important for both your sakes, Gina advised. That makes sense, I agreed. After finalizing the paperwork, Gina handed me a checklist and a card with the lab's contact information. Anything else I should know? I asked. That's all for now, she replied. Go ahead and handle these tasks. We'll inform you if we receive any updates from the investigator. For any questions about the fees, please speak to my secretary. And Greg, yes? Yes, I responded. Don't do anything rash. We'll get through this together. It won't be easy, but things will improve. I understand, I said, appreciating her support. Thanks for everything. You're welcome, she responded. We'll keep in touch. With that, I left her office, wrote a check for her services, and drove to the lab. After picking up the test kit, I stopped by the bank to verify some of the details Gina had mentioned. Then I headed home. This might have been a moment for some to drown their sorrows in alcohol, reflecting on the misery of their situation, but that's not me. I've never been a drinker, another one of those rules I grew up with. My parents didn't drink, and neither did I. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Just as the coffee was ready, my two daughters burst through the door. They usually came home around this time, taking the bus. Normally, they wouldn't see me until later, but today was different. Daddy, you're home, Lisa greeted me with surprise. Are you okay? Yes, Daddy, why are you home so early? Ginger chimed in. It's been a pretty hectic day, I explained. Listen, could you two pack some things for a few days? You're going to stay with your grandparents for a while. Why, Daddy? Ginger's voice was laced with concern. What's going on? Is something wrong with Mom? Did you guys have a fight? Well, yes, something is wrong, but your mom and I haven't had a fight. That might happen later, I said, trying to keep the conversation as light as possible. You caught her cheating, didn't you? Lisa's question caught me off guard. I was taken aback. What makes you think that? I asked. She looked down, slightly embarrassed. I've heard her on the phone a couple of times, she confessed. She was using that fake voice she does, you know, the one that annoys you. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. It was something like, I can't wait to see you again, love, and then she giggled. Not like herself at all. It sounded very personal. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. I know you don't like gossip, she added. It's all right, I reassured her, giving her a hug. Lisa then added, she's been acting really strange lately. It's like she doesn't really want to talk to us much anymore. Do you feel that way too, Ginger? I asked, turning to my younger daughter. She nodded. Yeah, like she doesn't want us bothering her. I gave them both a reassuring hug. You can bother me any time, I smiled. But right now I need to swab your cheeks for a test. Cheek swab? Ginger inquired, eyeing the test kit. Yes, I confirmed. My lawyer thinks we should do a DNA test. You don't think we're really your kids? Lisa asked, a hint of worry in her voice. I know you're my kids, I reassured her. But we just need to confirm everything legally. So you're getting a divorce? Lisa asked directly. It looks like it, I acknowledged. Isn't there any way you could forgive her? Ginger wondered softly. I don't think so, I replied. She made a mistake that's pretty serious. I had to see a doctor about it this morning. Lisa gasped, almost slipping out a swear word. Sorry, she muttered. It's okay, I assured her with a weak smile. I felt like swearing today too. Now let's get these samples done. I swabbed the inside of Lisa's cheek gently, then did the same for Ginger. Once their samples were secured in the kit, I took a swab from my own cheek and placed it into a separate vial. Okay, you two head upstairs and pack enough for a couple of nights. We need to be ready to leave in 15 minutes. And don't forget your homework, I instructed. As the girls went to their rooms to gather their things, I organized the DNA test kit. My plan was to drop the kids off at their grandparents' house and then take the kit to the lab. As we drove, Lisa asked, Daddy, if you get divorced, can I stay with you? Yeah, me too, Ginger chimed in. I hope so, girls, I responded. I'm going to ask for custody, but you need to understand that courts often favor the mother. I don't want to stay with her, Lisa confessed. Right now, I hate her for what she did to us. I thought about encouraging her not to hate her mother, but I held back. She was voicing feelings that were all too familiar to me. I understand how you feel, sweetheart, I assured her. Just remember, no matter what happens, I love you both immensely, and I'll always be there for you. I love you too, Daddy, Lisa said, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her tears made my resolve even stronger, fueled by my anger towards Marissa. In my mind, I vowed retribution. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. My father's words echoed in my head, calming my vengeful thoughts. We arrived at my parents' house and pulled into the driveway. I hugged and kissed both girls, promising to call them later. We were met at the porch by my dad, who hugged the girls as they carried their bags inside. Mom came out to greet us too. I'd better get to the lab before it's too late, I said after a few moments. Are you okay? My dad asked, concern evident in his voice. As fine as I can be under the circumstances, I replied. We'll pray for you, he said. Give us a call and let us know how things go with Marissa, he added. I will, but I'm not sure when that will be, I replied. It's okay, son, Mom reassured me. You can call any time. Thanks, I said, giving her a hug. I'd better head off now. I left, feeling a mix of support from my family and the heavy burden of the steps I needed to take next. I got back in my car and headed to the lab, arriving about 30 minutes before they closed. I handed the DNA test kit to the receptionist. How soon can I expect the results? I inquired. We should have them ready by the end of the week, she replied with a reassuring smile. Great, thanks, I said and left for home. Along the way, I felt the need to talk to someone who might shed more light on Marissa's behavior. I decided to call her sister, Loretta. I connected my Bluetooth earpiece and dialed her number. She picked up after the second ring. Hey Greg, how's my favorite brother-in-law? Loretta greeted cheerfully. I've had better days, I replied. Do you have a minute to talk? Of course, she responded. What's going on? Have you spoken to Marissa recently? Not since the family gathering last month at your place, I said. Actually, things aren't great. I briefly explained the situation, keeping the details succinct yet clear. Oh my God, Loretta gasped after I finished. Greg, I hate to say this, but it seems like she's fallen back into old patterns. Old patterns? I echoed, puzzled. Loretta hesitated before continuing. Marissa was quite wild in her younger days. She went through relationships rapidly, almost as fast as changing clothes. She wasn't faithful to anyone she dated during high school and college. I thought she had changed after meeting you. She even told me she had found her soulmate and was done with her old ways. I didn't think it was necessary to bring it up before. I appreciate that, but I wish I had known, I admitted. I'm sorry, Greg. I should have told you, she said. It's okay, Loretta. It's not your fault, I assured her, trying to keep my emotions in check. Listen, I understand you're planning to have her move out. I'm calling to see if she could possibly stay with you for a while, I said, getting to the point. Actually, yes, I added, if that's okay with you. I heard Loretta sigh on the other end of the phone. She might stay here for a bit until she sorts herself out, she said. Frank won't be thrilled, though. I don't want to cause any trouble for you guys, I responded, concerned. It's okay, he'll manage, just as long as it's not for too long, she reassured me. Thanks, I appreciate it. I'm not sure when she'll be home tonight, but I'll give you a call when she's on her way to you, I said. Thank you, Loretta replied. How did the girls handle everything? They're upset, but they're handling it better than I expected, I answered. You've raised strong young women, Greg. Stay strong for them, she encouraged. I'm trying, I said. I need to go make dinner now. We'll talk later, okay? I will, I promised, and then we ended the call. Back home, I warmed up some leftover meatloaf for dinner. Just as I finished eating, the phone rang again. It was Gina, my lawyer. I glanced at the clock. It was just past 6:30 p.m. Hey, I greeted her. Working late tonight? I asked for you, yes, Gina replied. I've received some preliminary findings from the private investigator. It appears Marissa has been quite active. She's met with 3 men since this afternoon. I was stunned. 3 men in one day? How does she even find the time? Yes, Gina confirmed. I'm sending over the details now, photos, videos, and a summary of the report. I'd advise against watching the video, but you should definitely listen to the last few minutes of the audio. It's quite revealing. So, do you think you have enough to proceed with the divorce? Absolutely, I affirmed. Good. Listen to that audio and then call me, she instructed. Will do. Thanks, Gina, I said, hanging up, feeling a mix of anger and relief that I was finally moving forward. I booted up my laptop and accessed my email. I found the video Gina mentioned and fast-forwarded to the specific part she had highlighted. Although I had no interest in watching Marissa in such a compromising situation, I was compelled to understand the context of their conversation. "I see you're married," the man remarked, noting her rings. "For the moment," Marissa replied casually. "I noticed you're married too," she observed, glancing at his ring. "Yes, my wife and I have an open relationship," he explained. "And you?" "It's not open in that sense, but I take my freedoms as they come," she stated. "So your husband doesn't know?" he probed. "No, he doesn't," she confessed. "He has no idea what kind of person he's married to," I thought bitterly. Now I'm realizing the truth. "What's the matter? Isn't he good to you at home?" the man asked, digging deeper. "He had better be. I taught him everything he knows," she boasted. "You taught him?" The man seemed surprised. "Was he inexperienced when you married?" "Believe it or not, he was a 23-year-old virgin," she divulged. "He's quite religious, doesn't smoke, drink, or even curse. He'd probably have a fit if I swore around him. He didn't even know how to make love until we were married." "Damn," the man reacted. "Sounds like you think he's a loser. So why stay with him? Is there love?" "In some way, I suppose. He's a good father, looks after our girls well, and doesn't complain when I come home late. But beyond that, he's dull," she admitted. "Are the girls even his?" he asked curiously. She shrugged nonchalantly. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe. It doesn't matter much to me. He believes they're his, and that's what counts," she claimed. "How long have you been fooling around?" he inquired. "I don't mind saying," she replied breezily. "I've been having my fun throughout our marriage, and he's still clueless. He has no idea, hasn't been with anyone else, so how would he know any different?" "Is that it?" he asked. "That's it," she confirmed. Hearing her dismiss our life and our family so flippantly devastated me. The depth of her deceit was far worse than I had imagined. At that moment, I had to hold back from throwing up. It made me feel sick to think that she'd been treating me like this throughout our entire marriage. "Do you plan to stick with him?" "Yeah, for now. At least until the girls finish high school and head to college," she said. "That's in about 4 or 5 years. I'll have everything ready to leave by then." "Why wait?" "Because usually the courts give custody to the mom, and the last thing I want is to end up with 2 teenage girls on my hands," she said. "What are you going to do after this?" "I want to party. Maybe hang out with a few people at once, maybe go on a cruise or retire to Costa Rica or something." "I'm not sure," she said. "Oh, I've got a couple of guys. Can you sneak away for the weekend?" he asked. "Sure," she said. "I can tell Greg I have a mandatory weekend seminar or something. He'll believe anything I say. Let me know when you can leave and we'll arrange it. You have my number?" "I will," she said, smiling. He checked his watch. "It's getting late and I need to go." "I can't wait to see you again, honey." "I'm excited too," she said. He left, and Marissa sat on the bed with a big grin. "Oh, Greg," she said to the empty room, "you have no idea what's coming." After watching the video, I sat there, stunned, wiping away tears. The depth of Marissa's betrayal hit me harder than I'd anticipated. With a heavy sigh, I dialed Gina. "I just finished watching the video," I told her. "You were right. It was enlightening." Gina's response was prompt. "What's your next move?" "Burn it to the ground," I replied, my voice steady. "Consider it done," she affirmed. "And what about the men she was with? Is there anything we can do about them?" I inquired, though part of me dreaded the answer. "Unfortunately, no," Gina explained. "Alienation of affection lawsuits aren't recognized in the state anymore." I paused, a bitter chuckle escaping me. "Don't worry, their own circumstances will catch up with them soon enough." Echoing my father's earlier words, I murmured, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." Gina chuckled softly. "Well, I need to get going," she said. "I'll start preparing the divorce papers and get everything in order. If Marissa plans to run, we'll make sure it's not on her terms." "Thanks, Gina, I really owe you for this," I said gratefully. "Just take good care of your girls," she advised. With our conversation over, I leaned back on the couch, tears streaming down my cheeks. 15 years of my life given to someone who had so little regard for our family, the pain was almost unbearable. A few minutes after hanging up with Gina, my phone buzzed. It was Marissa calling. "Hi," I answered. "Hi, Greg," she responded. "Are you okay?" "It's been a tough day," I admitted. "What's up with you?" "I'm just wrapping up at work." "I think I closed another sale," she said, sounding upbeat. "That's good," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I'll be home soon, so I'll see you in about half an hour, okay?" "Sure," I agreed. "Okay, I'll see you then. Love you," she said, her voice taking on that unnervingly insincere tone. "Me too," I responded and hung up. I wondered briefly if she noticed my lack of an "I love you" in return, but then realized it no longer mattered to me whether she did or not. I gathered the evidence I had printed earlier. 4 photos of Marissa with other men, all on a single sheet, and placed them in a folder. I arranged the folder on the kitchen table, where I planned to confront her when she arrived home. With everything set, I brewed a cup of coffee and sat down to wait. As the clock ticked past 1 hour, then 2, Marissa still hadn't come home. Concern mingled with frustration. I figured she might be delaying her return deliberately, but as more time passed without any word from her, worry crept in. I tried calling her cell phone, only to be directed to voicemail. I left a message and followed up with a text, but there was no reply. 3 hours after our call and still no sign of her, I began to fear something more serious might have happened, like an accident. Almost 3.5 hours after Marissa was supposed to be home, my home phone rang. I hurried to answer it, hoping it was her, but it wasn't. "Greg Watson," I answered. "Mr. Watson, this is Angela Barnes from Mercy Hospital. Are you related to Marissa Watson?" "She's my wife," I responded, my heart sinking. "Mr. Watson, your wife was in an accident and has been brought here for treatment. Can you come as soon as possible?" "Yes, of course," I said anxiously. "Is she okay? What happened?" "I'm sorry, sir, I can't provide any details," Angela replied. "Her doctor will speak with you when you arrive. Please come to the courtesy desk and they will direct you from there." "Thank you," I said, trying to keep my composure. After hanging up, I stuffed the envelope with the pictures into my jacket pocket. I considered calling Dad or Loretta for support, but decided to wait until I knew more. I drove to the hospital with a heavy heart, parked quickly, and hurried inside. At the courtesy desk, I introduced myself. "I'm Greg Watson, here to see Marissa Watson," I told the middle-aged woman behind the counter. She looked up Marissa's information and then nodded to another staff member. "Would you please take Mr. Watson to the ICU?" she instructed. The woman came around the desk and gestured for me to follow. We walked in silence to the ICU, where a police officer was waiting. "Mr. Watson?" he asked as we approached. "That's me," I confirmed. "I'm Officer Simpson. I responded to your wife's accident," he explained. "She was driving through the intersection of 3rd and Main when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car on the driver's side." My heart ached at the details. "I'm very sorry," he added, his tone sincere. "It's okay," I managed to say, although nothing felt okay. "Her car was towed to the junkyard," he continued. "There's not much left of it." He handed me a business card from the tow truck company. "If there's anything I can do to help, please give me a call." "Thank you, officer," I said, accepting the card. My mind raced with worry as I prepared to see Marissa, unsure of what awaited me. When the officer left, a man in a white medical coat approached me. "Greg Watson?" he inquired. "Yes," I replied. "I'm Dr. Blake, the doctor overseeing your wife's treatment. Can we talk for a moment?" "Of course," I responded. He led me to a small room, closed the door, and sat across from me at a round table. "How is my wife?" I asked immediately. "She has multiple broken bones and several internal injuries. Additionally, she suffered a severe blow to the head. We've placed her in a medically induced coma to aid her recovery," he explained. I nodded, bracing for more. "Is there anything else?" "Yes, there is more concerning news. Our preliminary tests suggest that she may be HIV positive. We've sent samples for more detailed blood tests, but it will take some time to confirm," Dr. Blake continued. I felt a cold wave of shock. "I found out this morning she has gonorrhea," I shared, still processing the news. "And are you receiving treatment for that?" he asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "That's good to hear. However, I recommend you get tested for HIV as soon as possible. If you could see your primary care doctor tomorrow, that would be best. It's important to know your status," he advised. I nodded, absorbing his recommendations. "How long will she be in the coma?" I asked, shifting the topic back to Marissa. "It depends on her progress, but it could be anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks. After that, her stay here may extend depending on her recovery speed," he explained. "Can I see her now?" I asked, eager yet anxious. "Absolutely," Dr. Blake said, standing. "She needs your support now more than ever." He led me to the door and pointed down the hall. "She's in room 5, just over there." "Thank you, doctor," I said, shaking his hand before walking to Marissa's room, my mind racing with everything I had just learned. I walked into Marissa's hospital room, and the sight of her struck me hard. She was swathed in bandages, with one leg encased in a cast that extended to her hip. Her face was bruised and swollen, stitched cuts marring her skin. She looked as though she had barely survived a brutal battle. Silently, I said a prayer for her, then took off my wedding ring. I pulled out the envelope containing the photos, wrote her name on it, and placed my ring inside before sealing it. Turning to the nurse who was attentively monitoring Marissa, I held out the envelope. "Could you make sure she gets this when she wakes up?" I asked. "Of course," the nurse replied warmly. "You can place it on that tray over there," she suggested, pointing to a nearby wheeled tray. "Thank you," I said, setting the envelope on the tray to ensure Marissa would see it upon awakening. I lingered for a moment, looking down at Marissa. Despite everything, it pained me to see her in such a state. Noticing she was still wearing her wedding rings, I gently removed them and pocketed them. "Goodbye, Marissa," I whispered. "I'll see you later." With a nod to the nurse, who offered me a sympathetic smile, I left the room. Driving home, I called Loretta to update her on the situation. She was stunned by the news, especially the complications with Marissa's health. "Greg, you know Frank won't be comfortable with her staying here if she's HIV positive," Loretta stated, her voice filled with concern. "He's worried about the kids, and I can't argue with him on that." Her parents had moved to Florida in retirement, eliminating another potential support option. "Then it seems I'll need to find her an apartment," I concluded. "I think that's wise," Loretta agreed. "I'm sorry, Greg, but I have to prioritize my family. She's made her choices. I can help move her belongings, but after that, I need to step back." "I understand," I reassured her. "You're doing what you need to do." "It's late, and I need to get some sleep, but please keep me posted," she said. "I will," I promised. "Thanks for everything, Loretta." Hanging up, I felt the weight of the day settling over me as I drove the rest of the way home in silence. It was close to midnight when I finally reached home. Exhausted from the day's events, I quickly undressed and fell into bed, asleep almost the moment my head hit the pillow. The next morning, I woke up feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I called my doctor's office and was surprised to find they could fit me in for an appointment later that morning. After securing my appointment, I called my parents to update them on Marissa's situation. They were understandably shocked, particularly about the possibility of her being HIV positive. They offered to bring the girls to the hospital if they wished to visit her. I also shared with them the troubling evidence I had gathered about Marissa. Dad asked me to send the details to his email, which I did immediately. "It's really bad," I admitted over the phone. "It's all right, son," he reassured me. "We'll handle this together." Once I had sent the email, I called Gina to inform her of the latest developments. She was also taken aback, but mentioned that this would allow her to finalize the divorce papers more promptly. I then contacted Marissa's office to inform her colleagues of her accident. They expressed their condolences and promised to visit her. The following 2 weeks were a blur of activity. I found a suitable 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment with an attached garage and secured it by paying the deposit and 2 months' rent up front, using funds from Marissa's half of our joint account. When the girls and Loretta arrived, we packed up all of Marissa's belongings, including our wedding album, and moved them to her new place. During this hectic time, I also received the results from the DNA lab, confirming that both girls were indeed mine. This was a small yet significant relief amidst the chaos. I met with the insurance adjuster to inspect the wreck of Marissa's car. Both of us were astounded she had survived the crash given the state of the vehicle. Since the car and insurance policy were in her name, the insurance company would issue her a check directly. I gathered the last of her belongings from the car and brought them to her new apartment, trying to close this painful chapter and focus on rebuilding our lives. A week after the accident, during a phone call, my mom asked, "Did you stop by Marissa's?" "No, I haven't," I replied, meaning since that initial visit. "Why?" she inquired. "I was just wondering," continuing with a tone of concern in her voice. "She's made it clear she doesn't care about us and wants to escape everything," I explained. "I'm giving her what she wants, just not how she planned it." 2 weeks later, I visited my doctor. Thankfully, I was clear of the gonorrhea Marissa had passed on, but we were still waiting to see if there was anything more serious. Physically, I was nearly healed, but emotionally, I was far from recovery. Later that day, I called my boss, Alan, to tell him I'd be returning to work, which pleased him greatly. That afternoon, the hospital called to say Marissa had woken from her coma. The nurse suggested I visit that evening, which worked well for me. I updated Gina, who had already filed the divorce papers and was waiting for Marissa to regain consciousness so the documents could be served. She arranged for the bailiff to meet me at the hospital. Next, I called Loretta to see if she would join me at the hospital. I then spoke to my daughters. "Your mom's awake," I told them. Their response was lukewarm, both shrugging off the news. "I'm going to see her this afternoon. Would you like to come?" "No thanks, Dad," Lisa replied firmly. "I'm too mad at her right now." "Me too," added Ginger, "and I've got a lot of homework." "All right," I said. "I'll drop you off at your grandparents' then." By 4:30, I was driving them to my parents' house. I told them Marissa was awake and that I would be meeting Loretta and the bailiff there. "Let us know how it goes, son," Dad said as I left the girls with them. "I will," I assured him. "I'll come back for the girls afterward." "Good. Then you can have some of Mom's lasagna when you get back," he said, offering a comforting smile. Mom's lasagna had a way of making any day better. "Sounds perfect," I said, feeling a slight lift in my spirits as I headed to the hospital. He handed her the documents. "You are being served with divorce papers," he stated formally. Marissa took the papers, her hands trembling slightly. There was a long pause as she scanned the top page, her face draining of color. I see, she finally murmured, setting the documents beside her on the hospital bed. I turned to Loretta, who had remained silent, her expression somber. Loretta, thanks for being here, I said. Of course, she replied softly, her eyes not leaving Marissa. Turning back to Marissa, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. We needed to resolve this, I told her, for everyone's sake. Marissa nodded, her eyes downcast. I understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted it to come to this. I know, I said, although I wasn't sure if that was entirely true. But here we are. The room was heavy with unspoken words and tension. I decided it was time to leave. I'll let you rest, I said. Marissa didn't look up. Thank you, Greg, and I am sorry, she added, her voice cracking slightly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. Loretta and I exited the room, leaving Marissa with her thoughts and the reality of the papers she now held. Outside, Loretta squeezed my arm. Are you okay? She asked. I will be, I answered, managing a small smile. Thanks for coming. It meant a lot. She hugged me briefly. Call me if you need anything, she said. I will, I promised. As I drove away from the hospital, the weight of the past week seemed to lift slightly. The future was uncertain, but at least now there was a path to begin moving forward. The process server handed Marissa the envelope and snapped a picture. You've been served, he declared briskly before exiting the room. You couldn't even wait until I was out of the hospital? Marissa asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. No, I replied firmly. You were the one who wanted to run away. I'm just accelerating your timetable by a few years. Her eyes searched mine for any sign of the man she once knew. Do the girls know? She asked, her tone shifting. Yes, they do, I confirmed. And they're not too fond of you right now, which is why they aren't here. And you don't need to worry about being burdened with them. I'm seeking full custody, though I'm willing to grant liberal visitation rights if they decide they want to see you. But as of now, they don't. Her expression faltered, clearly not expecting such decisiveness on my part. And I suppose you hate me too? She ventured. Hate is a strong word, I countered calmly. Let's just say my opinion of you has significantly diminished. She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of my words. Do you think you could ever forgive me? She asked, a hint of desperation in her voice. Maybe someday, I said, when I can look at our girls and not see the hurt you've caused. And just so you know, I had their DNA tested. They're mine. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by my proactive approach. That won't change anything, Greg, she murmured almost to herself. I see, I continued, shifting the topic. When you're discharged, you won't be coming home. I've rented an apartment for you. Loretta will help you move in. Marissa turned to look at her sister, who had remained silent until now. All your belongings are already there, and the utilities are set up in your name, I explained further, pulling out another envelope. Here's your half of our joint savings, minus the deposit and 2 months' rent for the apartment. Since your car was totaled, you'll also be receiving an insurance payout. She took the envelope from my hand, her touch hesitant. The room filled with a thick silence that seemed to stretch between us, laden with the finality of our fractured lives. She took the envelope and nodded her head. By the way, I know about the escape fund you set up. My attorney has frozen that account. If you sign the divorce papers, she'll release the funds, I said, minus my half, of course. Marissa added, her expression a mixture of shock and resignation. I'll fight you for it, she declared defiantly. I don't think that would be wise, I countered, unless you want all the evidence I've gathered to go public. It's quite damning. Her defiance seemed to deflate at my words. Have your lawyer review the papers. I believe you'll find the terms are as fair as they can be under the circumstances. Marissa turned to Loretta, seeking support, but found none. You should have listened, Loretta said coldly. You lied to everyone, Greg, your kids and me. I agreed to help you move into your apartment when you're discharged, but after that, I'm done. You need to sort yourself out. Marissa started to sob. I'm so sorry, she cried, looking for some sign of sympathy from her sister. That and a few bucks will get you a coffee, Loretta snapped back. I won't let you near my family again until you make things right, starting with a genuine apology to your husband and daughters. Through her tears, Marissa looked at me. Greg, I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I do love you. Right, it doesn't mean much, I replied coldly. Sign the papers, Marissa. She nodded, overwhelmed and silent. Goodbye, Marissa. As I turned to leave, she called out, Greg, can I call the girls? Please, you can call them, I said, pausing at the door. But it's up to them if they want to talk to you. I understand, she murmured. Thank you for that, at least. You're welcome, I said without turning back. I left the room, aware of the disapproving glances from the nursing staff. They might not have approved of the timing, but this was not their decision to judge. Driving away from the hospital, I headed to my parents' house. There, surrounded by family, I tried to find some solace in a hearty serving of my mom's lasagna, letting the familiar comfort of home soothe the sting of a painful day. The divorce process concluded smoothly. 3 months later, I found myself not only legally free from Marissa, but also relieved to learn that I was HIV negative, a fortunate result mirrored by Marissa as well. To my surprise, Gina presented me with a check for over $450,000, half of the secret account Marissa had amassed. With no immediate need for such a sum, I allocated it into college funds for Lisa and Ginger. Life adjusted to its new rhythm for me and my daughters. They were my anchor, keeping me grounded amidst the challenges of single fatherhood. Although managing teenage girls on my own was sometimes trying, my mother's advice and support proved invaluable. Marissa, on the other hand, seemed to be settling into her role as a single divorced woman. After a year of cautious interactions, the girls began to reconnect with her, spending an occasional afternoon together. Marissa had resumed her real estate career with a new company following an unceremonious exit from her previous employer due to disclosed indiscretions. According to the girls, she was performing well and had shed her deceptive tendencies. Meanwhile, I noticed an increasing amount of attention from the single women at church. They often sent me home with homemade dishes, from pies to lasagna, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by my daughters. "Dad, you need to start dating again," Lisa encouraged one evening. "It's not good for you to be alone," she added. "I wouldn't even know where to start," I confessed, feeling out of touch with dating. "And, I'm not alone," I continued. "You two keep me quite busy." "We won't be around forever, though," Ginger chimed in, with a mix of seriousness and humor. "It's simple, Dad. Just ask someone out to dinner. You can do that, right?" Reflecting on Ginger's words, I realized she might be right. It was perhaps time to explore life beyond fatherhood. That very Wednesday, I encountered Rhonda Carson at the church's coffee shop. Rhonda, a widow who had lost her husband to a tragic accident and was raising her teenage daughter solo, had recently given me a casserole that I had particularly enjoyed. "Hi Rhonda, how are you?" I initiated, recalling the comfort her dish had brought. "Hanging in there, Greg," she replied. "How about you?" "I'm doing okay. Really enjoyed that casserole last week. Thank you," I said, hoping to spark further conversation. "That's good to hear. It can be tough managing on your own, can't it?" She sympathized. "Yeah, it's a challenge sometimes, but we manage," I agreed, finding common ground in our shared experiences as single parents. Over coffee, we delved into the intricacies of raising teenagers alone. Encouraged by the ease of our exchange, I took a bold step. "Rhonda, I'm pretty new to this, but would you like to have dinner with me sometime?" "Maybe this Friday?" I asked, feeling a mix of anticipation and nerves. She smiled, her response warming my heart. "Yes, Greg, I'd like that," she accepted gracefully. "Great," I beamed, feeling a flicker of excitement about the possibilities ahead. "How about trying that new Texas Roadhouse place?" "Sounds perfect," Rhonda agreed. "It's a date then." Leaving the coffee shop, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in a long time. Perhaps it was the right moment to start anew, not just for me, but for everyone involved. The girls were excited about my date with Rhonda, and they liked the idea of spending the evening with Linda, so it was all set. That Friday, I invited the girls over, and we went out to dinner. Rhonda looked really cute in her denim skirt, and we had a great time. We didn't get too intimate that night, but Rhonda gave me a heartfelt kiss as I dropped her off at her house. I caught a glimpse of 3 faces peeking out from her window, and it looked like they were cheering us on. Rhonda hugged me and said, "That was the best night I've had in months." "Me too," I replied. "What if we do this again soon?" she suggested with a smile. "Maybe next time we can have a quiet evening in," she hinted playfully, her hand gently brushing my leg. I felt a spark of excitement. "That sounds like a plan," I agreed, enjoying the flirtation. The girls were thrilled about how well the date went, and honestly, I was too. Spending time with Rhonda felt natural and refreshing. While I'm not certain where this might lead, I'm open to exploring where our next steps might take us. I'm getting married in 2 weeks, and I'm in serious trouble. I literally need to get this off my chest. I feel like I'm going insane. My fiancée, Sarah, 28 female, and I, 34 male, have known each other for about 6 years, engaged for 1. Our wedding is scheduled to take place in just 2 weeks, and I just witnessed something that is making me feel like I am making the biggest mistake of my life. Tonight, Sarah and I were taking a rare opportunity to relax at home. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner while I was out back working on one of my projects. We live in Anchorage, and I am building a pagoda fire pit in the backyard that we were planning on using this fall. Anyway, as you do when you're doing heavy labor, I got thirsty and came back to the house to get a drink, where I saw Sarah at the counter preparing dinner and talking on speakerphone. I recognized the voice instantly as my brother-in-law, Marty. Now, this is where my brain gets totally twisted. Marty asks Sarah where her sister Evelyn is, as he's been trying to get in contact with her, and she's not answering texts. I hear Sarah say to him, "She just left here. She should be home in a half hour or so." It should be noted that Evelyn is Marty's wife of 5 years. I have to admit that I didn't immediately register what she had just said because I went into the kitchen, grabbed a glass and asked Sarah, "What was that all about?" She responds with, "Marty was looking for Evie." I see her texting and I ask her, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm texting Evie that Marty was looking for her." Anyway, I pour myself a drink, sit down, have a sip, and then finally my brain starts to work. First off, I heard Sarah tell Marty that Evelyn was here. Evelyn was not here, and the last time we saw her was yesterday when she came over to work on some last-minute wedding decoration stuff with Sarah. Secondly, why is she texting Evelyn and expecting a response when I distinctly heard Marty say that Evelyn wasn't answering her texts? Lastly, why the hell would she tell Marty that Evelyn should be back in 30 minutes unless she either knows where she is, then why did she lie? Or she is, right now in front of me, texting her to tell her to get her butt home quickly? The only conclusion that I came up with is that Sarah is lying to Marty about the whereabouts of her sister, Marty's wife, and is probably warning Evie that Marty will expect her home in half an hour. I then spent probably the next 5 hours concocting various explanations for this behavior, some decent, some downright horrible, and playing them back in my head. I wanted really badly to ask Sarah about this, but at the same time, if what I think is going on, then I doubted I'd get a straight answer, which brings me to about an hour ago. I woke up around 1 a.m. to use the toilet, and I couldn't resist the urge to check Sarah's phone. We both know each other's pins, so this wasn't a difficult thing to do. Anyway, I grabbed the phone, retreated to the bathroom, and unlocked it, and yep, it was exactly what I was afraid of and probably what most of you were expecting. Sarah's sister Evelyn has been having an affair for about 6 months with a coworker, and Sarah has been helping Evelyn cover it up for almost that entire time. There are literally hundreds of texts between them discussing it, discussing the coworker, discussing sex stuff, really embarrassing things about my brother-in-law and probably uncharitable. Just stuff that makes my stomach churn. And here is my soon-to-be wife going along with all of it without batting an eye. I took some screenshots of the entire thread, put the phone back where I found it, and then retreated to my home office to find myself here typing it all out on Reddit simply so I can avoid the primal scream that wants to come out of my mouth right now. I am totally 100% screwed, Reddit. I cannot marry Sarah. I just cannot do it. I can't think of any reasonable excuse she could offer me about assisting her sister in this affair and victimizing not only Marty but their 2-year-old daughter as well. On the other hand, myself, my family, Sarah, and her family have all sunk an enormous amount of money into a wedding that is supposed to happen in around 2 weeks. There is no way we are getting any of that money back. On top of that, I feel like an absolute fool. Like, how did I not know this woman was like this? And what the hell am I going to do? I can't marry her. I absolutely cannot. However, I still want to. She's beautiful and fun and kind, and I thought we had a bright future ahead of us. She's never done anything wrong to me, but I just can't see her the same now. It's like a big black stain on an otherwise beautiful picture. I just don't know how the hell I got this so wrong, and I'm absolutely dreading doing what I know I need to do. I feel like I want to vomit or break something. Edit, guys, you don't need to convince me to not marry Sarah. That's obvious. The wedding is off. I'm just trying to figure out my next steps and work up the nerve to do it. There's an incredible amount of pressure on me from the expectations of everyone, but I'm not going to buckle under it. I just am not relishing having to deal with the fallout, and I'm more than a little angry that I'm in this situation. Edit 2, it's 5 a.m. I have work in 3 hours, and I'm running off a couple of hours of sleep. I'm going to take a shower and head into work a little early to avoid Sarah and Stu on this. Thanks for the support of people here. And a big raspberry to the dillholes who keep saying I should figure out whatever good reason my soon-to-be ex-fiancé had for this garbage. Edit 3. I got into work around 7. No one was in the office, so I decided to start pulling off the Band-Aid and called my brother. He lives in Australia, so he was still up after having just put his kids to bed. It was hard breaking the news to him about this because I know he has laid out a huge amount of money for flights for him and his family to come, but to his credit, as an older brother, he didn't mention it one time and just backed me up. He made a great point too. He said, totally paraphrasing, "You work in a job where you have to deal with liars and scammers day in and day out. I don't blame you for wanting to have somewhere to go where this isn't a concern. He was totally right about that, and I get now why I am reacting so strongly to Sarah's participation in this deceit. He also had a great idea. He was going to take his family down to Florida to do some sightseeing and visit the parks. Well, now the kids will be accompanied by their uncle as well. It should be easy since we were going to honeymoon there as well, and we were planning on meeting them for a bit anyway. I'll just rebook everything to be closer to him and his family, and I'll offer Sarah's ticket to either my sister or another family member. I haven't had time to read everyone's comments, but I have answered a few. Right now, I'm just sort of making myself sick by drinking cup after cup of coffee and trying to distract myself until the day gets on enough where I can reach out to Marty. Edit 4. Just did morning stand-up. My stomach is doing flip-flops from drinking about 2 pots of coffee since I got in here so early, and I absolutely cannot focus and concentrate. I feel like I can't do anything really from my side until I tell Marty what I know. So I'm just going to take a sick day and drive over to his house and see if he's around. If not, I'll call him and track him down. Marty is a teacher who is on break right now, and Evelyn works a 9 to 5 like me, so odds are good this works out. Wish me luck, Reddit. Edit 5. Got to Marty's house a little after 10 a.m. He had just put his daughter down for a nap, and we had a long, frankly brutal talk in the kitchen. Basically, he suspected this for a couple of months now, but Evelyn has been very good at covering her tracks, obviously with the assistance of Sarah and a couple of their mutual friends. I unfortunately do not have all 6 months of text messages, just a couple of dozen screenshots I sent to myself from Sarah's phone, but I gave him what I have and offered to help him however I could. I am a field analyst in the SIU department of a mid-sized insurer specializing in workers' compensation fraud, so I know a few things and a few people. Anyway, I am now working from my laptop in my almost brother-in-law's kitchen, trying to salvage whatever I can. I'm going to have to talk to Sarah this evening and get the word out as fast as I can to my friends and family now that I know I won't screw Marty over. So far, I managed to rebook most of the honeymoon, although I had a problem with the ticket because Sarah was flying under her maiden name, and our carrier has a surname rule for name changes. Anyway, they did allow me to cancel and get a partial refund and rebook to my sister, who will be accompanying her 2 brothers and nieces to Florida in a couple of weeks. I'm holding off on canceling the venues until after I talk to Sarah because I don't want to tip anyone off until Marty gets his chance to confront Evelyn. But I will absolutely be letting my family and friends know this afternoon sometime and beg them to keep it close. I'm basically in a frenzy right now canceling stuff I can cancel, and I'm heading down to the bank in a few to open a new account and getting my bills paid sorted out, the finances. Some people have mentioned them, but it should be pretty good. The mortgage is in my name since we were not married, and I have the bigger income, but Sarah did contribute about $20,000 versus my $60,000 towards the down payment. I will have to probably pay her out that money and some portion of the mortgage payments for the last 16 months, but it could be worse. P.S. How come so many are confused regarding brother and brother-in-law? Edit 6. I'm going to go silent for a while. This post has already been circulating around TikTok, and has gone way, way, way beyond what I thought it ever would when I was freaking out in the middle of the night. First off, I want to say something here. I do not hate Sarah. I don't approve of what she did. I frankly find it repulsive, and I'm shocked by uncovering how two-faced she can be and how she treats people. But I don't hate her. I'm just incredibly sad about everything, and the I'm screwed part of my post is really the short-time FRA me I have to work under. Basically, our relationship is in a state where I cannot get married to her, but we're supposed to get married in 2 weeks. Maybe if we had 2 months, or better yet a year or so, to work through this, my approach might be vastly different. But I don't have that luxury. I have to move now. There's just no way I can enter into marriage with the state our relationship is in now, so I'm not going to. End of discussion, guys. Anyway, I will report back later tonight with how everything today went. Hopefully, it will be less traumatic than I'm anticipating. Edit 7. I have no idea how long a Reddit post can be, as I've never written such a long one before in my life, so I hope that this goes through. It's about 8:30 p.m. right now, and I'm writing this from my buddy's house. His name is Mark, a former TO worker of mine who is also in the same field of work. As I mentioned in a previous update, I work as a field analyst in the SIU department of a decent-sized insurance carrier. For people who don't know what that is, I'm basically a private detective. My job is to investigate what we think might be fraudulent claims in regards to workers' compensation. Anyway, as I kind of hinted at, Marty asked for my help in finding out who the other guy was that Evelyn was cheating on him with. All we had to go on was a name. Let's call him Jake. The first thing I did was not some major amount of sleuthing. It was basically just going through LinkedIn, trying to find the guy through Evelyn's connections. But that brought up nothing, which I thought was strange. Marty had told me that Evelyn was supposed to go out for drinks tonight after work, and that she said she wouldn't be home until around 9 or 10. He didn't have to tell me what he suspected since I pretty much understood right away. I told him that I would help him, but he needed to come with me. I then contacted my buddy Mark, explained the situation to him, and had him agree to meet us later in the day. The first thing we did was drive over to Marty's parents' house so that they could watch their granddaughter. I don't know what Marty told them as I waited in the car. After that, we went to Evelyn's place of work. It's one of those large commercial strip mall type centers, with all of these nondescript offices in a row and a large non-gated car park. We drove around until we found Evelyn's car, and then I had Marty unlock it with the second set of keys. I then gave Marty a voice-activated recorder and a GPS tracker to place in the car. Once done with that, we left, parked a bit down the street, and waited for my friend to arrive and for Evelyn to leave the business. Mark shows up about 20 minutes later, hops in the car with us, and around an hour after that, Evelyn comes out of her office with 2 of her girlfriends and a tall, younger-looking man with sandy blonde hair. They are obviously holding hands, and I'm like, "Damn, Evelyn, you're making it easy for me." I take a couple of pictures from the car and then wait for Evelyn to leave in hers, and I start tracking her. At first, I thought she might go right to a hotel or something, but she didn't. Instead, she drove to a reasonably nice bar and grill in a nice section of town and parked on the street. I drove by her as she was getting out of her car and entering the establishment, and then found my own parking spot and went over the plan. First, we sent Mark in since no one knew him. He had basically 2 jobs. First, try to get any compromising pictures he could of Evelyn and Jake, and second, to be my alibi. Marty and I waited in the car for around 20 minutes until I got the first in a series of text messages from Mark. They were pictures of Evelyn and Jake making out in front of their 2 female co-workers. Marty's suspicions were right. They were helping Evelyn hide the affair from him. He was obviously very upset and angry. Evidently, one of the CO workers is married, and as a couple, they are good friends with Marty and Evelyn, both of them having toddlers around the same age. I asked Marty if that's enough for him, but he says he still really wants to know who this guy is. I try to tell him that we can find out later, but he's practically begging me at this point, so I tell him to wait. Text Mark that I'm coming in, and then enter the bar myself. The first thing I see is Evelyn and her crew laughing and drinking at one of those tall, round tables near the front window. As I enter, I stop for a moment, pretend to be surprised, and then call out to Evelyn, "Evelyn, hi! What are you doing here?" She's obviously shocked to see me, and everyone around her tenses up immediately. Evelyn quickly introduces me as her sister's fiancé and says that we are getting married in 2 weeks. There are a lot of congratulations from everyone. I thank them and then stick out my hand to the blonde guy and introduce myself with my full name, hoping that he'll respond in kind. He does, and I'm a bit taken aback. He's not named Jake. I introduce myself to everyone else and then tell Evelyn that I'm here to meet a coworker. I wave to Mark and then excuse myself. Once I get over to Mark, I tell him the guy's name, and we both whip out our phones and go to work. It doesn't take long for us to find him. He's got social media profiles and a couple of court case judgments against him. Everything sort of falls into place when we find out that Jake is his middle name. At this point, I'm basically just grateful that Evelyn isn't cheating on Marty with 2 different Keo workers. Turns out that Jake is 26, married, and has a 1-year-old daughter. This just keeps getting better, worse actually. Anyway, I text Marty the guy's name, and I decide I want to push my luck and tell him to wait a few more minutes. Basically, I'm playing babysitter here at the bar. I'm totally visible to Evelyn and her crew. I can see out of the corner of my eye that no one is particularly happy about this, and my presence is really ruining the night. This is good. I let this go on for about 10 minutes and then tell Marty to text Evelyn that he's spending the night at his parents' house with their daughter. It doesn't take long after that until I catch Evelyn taking out her phone, showing it to Jake, and then everyone deciding to pack up. Evelyn comes over to me, says goodnight, and asks me if Sarah and I want to come over for dinner this weekend. I smile and say that sounds like a great idea, and wish her and her Keo workers a good night. Mark and I wait for them to leave, then pay our bill and hurry back to the waiting Marty. There's a bit of hesitation here because we don't know exactly what Evelyn was going to do. I half assumed she might have already booked a hotel room and was heading there, which would have made everything a lot more complicated and limited what I could do. But it turns out that tonight was probably meant to be just drinks at the bar, and it wasn't until Marty decided to spend the night at his parents' that it turned into something more. Evelyn made a beeline for home, and we followed behind her way out of sight and parked down the street. It didn't take long after that until another car pulled into Marty's driveway, and we saw Jake get out, go up to the door, knock, and be greeted by Evelyn. They went inside together. Now, at this point, it's about 7:30, and I have my own stuff to do tonight, and I think that as a friend, I've done pretty much all I can do for Marty, and he can handle the rest himself. I mean, I feel bad for the guy, definitely. But I don't want to get any more involved in this drama than I already am. And being the wingman for him while he confronts his cheating wife is a bit much for me considering my situation. Marty says it's fine, that he'll do the rest of it himself. Guess he's more of a man than you thought, Evelyn. He goes to Evelyn's car, retrieves my gear, and we bid each other goodbye. That was almost 2 hours ago. I did get one text message from Marty saying it was done and he was going to his parents' house for real this time, but my phone hasn't been blowing up, so I don't know what's been going on with Evelyn. I've been at Mark's since then. I think that basically concludes my part in Marty's story. If he was smart and listened to my advice, he was recording with his phone when he entered the house. I'll find out later. Anyway, my biggest priority now is to head home and tell Sarah that the wedding is off. She's almost 100% going to take it badly. There's no way she won't. But like I said, I just can't get married to her right now. I don't know what the future holds for us or if we will be done with each other or not, but definitely we are not getting married anytime soon. Also, for people who keep saying, why didn't you talk to her first? Why didn't you confront her? I have to say, are you people stupid? She stone cold lied in front of me to her brother-in-law that she has known for about 10 years and purportedly thinks is a really great husband and father. Maybe you are naive enough to think that someone can lie that coldly to someone they are supposed to care about and then tell you the truth, but I'm not wired that way. Until that moment, I never had cause to ever second-guess Sarah or not trust her, but she was literally untrustworthy in front of my face, and I'm supposed to let it slide or expect her to be honest to me? I guess you don't know what it's like to have your entire view of someone shift in an instant. It's disorienting, and frankly, a bit panic-inducing. I'm actually impressed I kept my head and followed my instincts instead of pressing her right away because it led me to the truth. It would have been ridiculously easy for her to lie to me and then delete those text messages, and if she had done that, then I would never have read the horrible things she said. Never seen how she can be so duplicitous and two-faced, and never realized how little I actually knew about her. I'm going home to talk to Sarah. I'll update later to let everyone know what the final verdict is. Don't expect it to be a good one. Edit 8. Well, I had the talk with Sarah last night. It was pretty insane. I'm honestly burnt out and still exhausted, even though I took another sick day and slept in. Until almost 4:11. Sleep deficit is real. I know everyone is thirsty for updates, but as much as it's therapy for me to write them, I am just absolutely drained. And as you may have noticed, I don't know how to be short. Just call it a character trait for my profession and the endless amount of minutia-filled reports I've written. I will give the too long didn't read, and I promise to do a proper update later. Long story short, I came home to talk to Sarah about canceling the wedding and found her comforting Evelyn on the couch. I almost turned around and walked out, but didn't. Words were exchanged, tears were had, people got really angry, and the cops were called. I collapsed and slept for like 10 hours, and my phone is practically glowing from the heat of a bajillion unread messages and missed calls. If it vibrates anymore, I'm going to take it to Evelyn's office and charge $10 a minute to sit on it. Stuff is really up in the air. I have a lot to do today. My family already knew what was going on by yesterday afternoon, but I need to contact some friends today and get a move on other things. I'm just going to answer a couple and then bug out for a few to get stuff done. First, I am not James Bond. I am the guy that follows around the disabled construction worker to his Zumba class or skydiving lesson. I've been doing it for about 5 years, and I'm pretty good at it. Nothing I did went beyond a 50 GPS you can buy from Amazon and a tiny bit of social engineering. You might be surprised how far social engineering can get you, but whatever. Second, I am off the clock on the mysterious case of Marty and the hoe-bag, hobgoblin, whatever. Marty does with the info he has, including contacting the other wife, is on him. I'm not interjecting myself into this mess any more than I have. Marty is a good friend, but I have my own little world collapsing right now. And now that I don't have my moral indignation to distract me, it's becoming a bigger burden than I have been letting on. Third, I am not an aspiring screenwriter or novelist. I do, however, write a lot of reports you have no idea. Most of my life is actually spent hunched over a laptop writing a report or transcribing statements. For every hour I spend doing field work, I probably spend 10 doing paperwork or research. Fourth, you are right that I was wrong to leave Marty to go it alone. I didn't have any fear, not even an iota, that Marty would do anything stupid, but I didn't properly take into account the risk to him. That's a personal failing of mine. It's not that I don't care, I just tend to estimate that other people handle things like I do, and hence Marty was doing something that I would do. So I didn't question it like I should have. I know this is a problem of mine, and I'm working on it. but I'm also not in the best place emotionally, so my EQ was low in the situation. Last, people saying, "You don't know the whole situation. What if Marty was an abuser, yada, or yada yada?" No, buddy, you don't know the whole situation. I do. I read months of text messages. I know why Evelyn did what she did. I know how she feels about Marty. I know how my ex-fiancé played along with this. I'm just not sharing it because it's vile. But I know, and it played a big part in how I have acted in the last day and a half. Trust me, if Sarah had done something, anything, other than encouraging and egging on Evelyn, we'd all probably not be here, but she did, so we are. Anyway, that's it from me. I will try to update again in the next few days with the whole fallout, but I am probably going to be mostly off Reddit for now. Best of luck to everyone, and thank you to all the people backing me up. It meant a lot to me and helped keep me sane. Well, some semblance of sane anyway. August 8th, 2023 update. Hi, it's me again. I want to thank everyone who has sent me kind messages and support here on Reddit and even on other platforms. This has really blown up, and frankly, it's totally bizarre to see my life plastered all over the internet. But it's also nice to see so many people seeming to be genuinely concerned for me. It helps a lot. At first, I had a bit of trepidation about how visible this became, like, what have I done? But since this past weekend, I decided to just roll with it. After all, the cat is already out of the bag, and I really believe I've done nothing wrong here, despite a small minority of commentators saying otherwise. I guess there is a lot to go over, and so much has happened. Most of it, if I'm honest, hasn't been that great. Well, it's actually been downright shitty, but I'll get to that. First off, I left Mark's house pretty late that night. Sarah already knew I was out discussing business with him, although she had no idea that the business was actually her sister's affair. But still, it was getting to an unreasonable hour, mostly because I was trying to get up the nerve to go home and face her. After about 2 or 3 pep talks from Mark, I finally got off my keister, texted Sarah that I was coming home, and left in my car. As I said in the last update, I was pretty surprised when I got there because when I walked into the house, Evelyn was crying on the couch with Sarah. I hadn't seen Evelyn's car in the driveway when I came home, so this was probably the last thing I was expecting. I froze for a moment and almost turned around and left. This was not how I imagined this going down, and I knew that Evelyn's presence was going to make a bad situation 1,000,000 times worse. Still, I had a timetable that I wanted to move on. I had friends I needed to notify and wedding preparations to cancel, and the proverbial clock was ticking in the back of my head. When I entered the room, both Sarah and Evelyn looked up at me in acknowledgement, but the tirade of accusations never came. I just stared back, raising my eyes in question. The moment passed, and Evelyn went back to crying. Sarah back to comforting. And I let it awkwardly hang in the air for half a minute while I thought. It seemed that Marty hadn't mentioned my assistance in the uncovering of Evelyn's affair. I decided to play dumb, not for any reason other than I wanted to see how Sarah reacted. I took a seat on a recliner, put down my laptop bag, and took my phone out of my pocket. I made it look like I was fidgeting with it and then asked them, "What's going on?" Evelyn just continued to cry, but Sarah looked at me and said, "Marty is divorcing Evie." Well, yes, I figured as much. I decided to push ahead with the obvious question, "What for?" I asked her. Sarah stopped patting Evelyn's back for a moment and looked at me. I could almost see her face twist and contort. Imagine the look a 5-year-old makes when you tell them to eat their broccoli or finish their lima beans. Evelyn shot Sarah a look that I didn't need to be a sister to understand, and there was a pregnant pause until Sarah finally said, "She cheated on him." Now, I have to admit, this response freaking floored me. This was absolutely not what I was expecting. Sure, the more cynical readers here might think, well, the cat was out of the bag, so there's no point in hiding it. And yes, that's true, but it's also true that she could have just as easily feigned ignorance, or even worded it another way, like, Marty accused Evie of cheating, instead of basically confirming it to my face. Maybe I'm being pedantic here, but it's part of my job to pay attention to not only what people say, but how they say it. Evelyn wasn't happy about this. She kind of crumpled into the couch a bit and did this strange combination of a sigh and sob at the same time. I wanted to press on, go for the gold, so to speak, but I must have stammered a bit. Sarah probably interpreted it as shock, and, well, she would have been right in a sense, just not how she assumed. "Did you know?" Sarah didn't say anything. She just nodded, her hand still rubbing her sister's shoulder. I didn't hesitate and asked for the obvious follow-up, "How long?" The answer came back a lot easier than I thought it would, 6 months. I was shocked by how easily she admitted to it. Evelyn was shocked as well. She smacked her sister's hand off her, and I think even Sarah was a little shocked at saying it out loud. I leaned back in the recliner and rubbed my face. Time to tug the rest of that Band-Aid clear off. "We're not getting married." There were 2 looks like stunned goats and a chorus of, "Huh, what?" from both sisters. I stood up and repeated myself, "We're not getting married. I can't marry someone who would cover up adultery, especially not for 6 months." Sarah sprang off the couch and opened her arms. The body language was, "You can't be serious." But I just put my hands in front of myself. "I'm serious. I don't like this, not one bit. I don't like that you took part in this, and I can't get married to you with how I feel. It would be a mistake." The waterworks started immediately, and even Evelyn did that thing with her mouth that looks like a perch trying to suck air. There were wails from Sarah, accusations of not loving her, appeals to my sense of duty, to the loss of money, the inconvenience to all our friends, the embarrassment of it all. It was frankly nothing I hadn't already thought about, but it definitely felt different hearing Sarah say it through body-racking sobs. It was at this point I probably made a big mistake. Well, maybe not, because I have no idea how long Marty would have kept my involvement in everything off the books. But in an effort to convince Sarah of the finality of it all, I said, "Look, I already canceled the honeymoon. It's not happening." I knew it was a bomb the second it left my mouth, and the explosion was damn near immediate. Evelyn, to her credit, had always been pretty quick on the uptake, which is probably how she had managed to fool her husband for so long. I could almost see the realization dawning on her when she put it all together with my appearance at the bar earlier in the evening. She screamed, "You son of a bee," and flew across the room at me. Now, I'm not a huge guy, but I'm no slouch either, but the force that Evelyn flung herself at me had me staggering backward, and I barely had enough time to get my hands up before she started raking my face with her fingernails. I almost lost the phone I still had in my hand, but still managed to push her away and say very loudly, "Evelyn, get off me! Sarah, get your sister under control." Evelyn made another lunge for me, but surprisingly, Sarah did exactly what I asked her to and wrapped her arms around her sister's waist and held her in place. I looked at Evelyn and yelled, "Get out of here right now, or I'm calling the police," holding my phone up for emphasis. Sarah asked both of us to calm down. She said to me, "Op, she doesn't have anywhere to go right now," and Marty took her car keys. That explained the lack of a car in the driveway, but I didn't care. I was 100% through with Evelyn, and I was going to make sure she knew it. I marched into my home office, locked the door, and dialed the police. I told them I had been attacked by my fiancé's sister and had locked myself in my office. That I was bleeding from my face, Evelyn had scratched me pretty good along the inside of my left eye, and that my vision was blurry, and I feared for my life. I even told them that I had recorded the entire altercation on my phone. Just as I was finishing up my conversation, Sarah came knocking on the door. "Oh, please come out. We need to talk about this, and please, I love you, don't do this. We don't need to do this, and even Evelyn is sorry, she wants to apologize." I'm pretty sure that last one was a lie, but Sarah was obviously losing her mind. I didn't answer her, and her attempts to cajole me out of the office ended probably right when the police rocked up to our front door. I could hear Sarah talking to them, and I decided to come out. The cops were 2 males. One of them looked younger than me, maybe around Sarah's age, and the other one looked older and more annoyed about life in general. I introduced myself, pointed at Evelyn, stating that she attacked me, and offered to show the cops the recording I made. The younger one asked me if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. He asked me again if I wanted to press charges. I said yes again. At this point, both cops looked at each other, and before the young cop could open his mouth again, I said, "Yes, damn it, I want to press charges. I have video evidence, and this is going to court, or else I'm going to call up your boss." I dropped his name here, and asked him to come down and do it himself. I think they were pretty surprised that I knew his name. Not that we are friends or anything, but given my line of work, I spend plenty of time interfacing with local law enforcement. And I have met most of the brass or talked to them on the phone a couple of times in the last few years. Honestly, at this point, I was getting pretty hot under the collar, and while I get what these guys were thinking, I don't agree with it at all. Facts are facts. Sure, I might not be bleeding out on the floor, but Evelyn assaulted me in my own home and I wanted her gone. Thankfully, the situation didn't immediately escalate, and the 2 officers handcuffed Evelyn and put her in the back of the patrol car. She was squealing and crying like some sort of gibbering maniac the entire time. Sarah wasn't much better, she just kept going, "No, please, no," over and over again. At this point, the younger cop circled back and asked us if everything was okay here. I just told them I was going to bed. He asked Sarah again, and she didn't immediately answer, so he goes, "Is everything okay here, ma'am?" It was clear what he was fishing for at this point. I really disliked this guy, but I bit my lip. Sarah finally realized that the cop was addressing her, and she just nodded at him. Obviously, the guy is not satisfied with this and starts to ask her again, at which point I interject and say, "If you want to go on a fishing expedition, you might want to do it over there on the lawn where my doorbell camera isn't recording you." And I think at this point, I had pushed my luck with this guy one too many times, but what could I do? I think I was probably about 30 seconds from getting the cuffs slapped on me until his partner came up and basically pulled him away. He was an older man, probably in his late 50 seconds, and probably didn't want to process 2 arrests right at the beginning of his shift, especially when one of them was obviously going to be more trouble than it was worth. I'm pretty sure he talked him out of it, and they left, carrying Evelyn away and hopefully out of my life forever. At this point, I'm thinking about if I want to stay here or not. The fact that my parents live a couple of hours away, combined with the thought of how poor I'm going to be in the short term here, ruled out either their place or a hotel, so I just decided to sleep in the guest room. Sarah made some feeble efforts to get me to engage with her in conversation or to sleep in our bed, but I just told her we'd talk tomorrow and that I was tired and didn't want to be disturbed. Thankfully, she let me be, and I crashed harder than I had in years. Which pretty much brings us up to speed with the last update, but dear friends of Reddit, let me tell you this. The next day was by far the weirdest effing day of my life. To start with, I woke up at 1100 a.m. Sarah was still home. She had cleaned the house from top to bottom. I mean, the floors sparkled, the toilets shined. I could lick the linoleum in the bathroom, and it'd probably be minty fresh. She had obviously been busy, but when she saw me, she sort of hovered out of immediate range, not quite engaging but looking like she wanted to say something. I get it, last night was traumatic for everyone, and she was probably uncertain like, did I just cancel the wedding in the heat of the moment? Was I serious about this? Was I really angry? I took a deep breath and told her we needed to finish talking. She tried to sit next to me on the couch, and I thought about rebuffing her, but I didn't. We were not getting married, but I didn't need to act like I hated her because truthfully, I didn't. I was disappointed in her, decently disgusted by some of the things I had read in her text exchanges with her sister, but we were both hurting here. And I didn't want to make it any worse or escalate things to a point where life could get any more complicated than it already was. It took some more convincing on my part for Sarah to truly and fully believe the wedding was off. She was not taking it well. Hell, that's an understatement. She was a wreck. I think she was hyperventilating a few times. I was holding it together better, but obviously not only was this my idea, I had also had longer to come to terms with it. Finally, she asked the serious question, what about us? I know I'm going to get a lot of hate from people for this, especially the kind of Redditors that think every infraction in a relationship is grounds for nuking it from orbit. And indeed, one could even say that my calling off the wedding was like dropping a Moab on our 6-year partnership. But truthfully, I didn't have an answer for Sarah in that moment. I just didn't know, and I told her so. I said, I read all those text messages, and it showed me a side of you that I didn't know existed, and that I wasn't certain about you or our relationship anymore. I said I couldn't understand why she would go along with Evelyn, putting down Marty and joining in, even egging her on and cheating on not only him but their daughter too. She just kept saying, I know it was wrong, I know. I asked her for an explanation, but she couldn't provide one. She just said that she got carried away, and that she had to choose her sister. I told her that I thought a good sister was someone who kept you on the straight and narrow, and didn't give you a free pass to be a douchebag. She agreed with me and said that she would do better, but that Evelyn had always been the boss when they were kids, and she was always the follower. I get this. I have an older sibling too, and while I'm a bit more independent, I also spent the last 18 years of my life with him living on the other side of the planet, except for the odd occasional visit around Thanksgiving or Christmas. But still, maybe I had a leg up on Sarah because my older sibling was a decent guy while Evelyn was a piece of trash. Now here's where I get the second major effing shock of my life in like 48 hours. Sarah says to me, it's not fair. It's not fair. What's not fair? I ask her. You were sexting that bimbo wife Mandy girl on Instagram last year and I got over it. I was so hurt, but I got over it. Why can't you get over this? Why? Huh? What? What the hell is she talking about? Who is this bimbo wife Mandy? Like, I have no effing clue. I asked her if she was high or having a psychotic break. Or like, okay, that was mean of me, but I have absolutely not been doing cybersex or sexting or whatever with anyone, especially not some Instagram girl. I'm protesting pretty loudly at this point, and Sarah is yelling at me through her tears, telling me that she saw the messages last year and that she decided to not confront me because I had stopped it. Evidently, she had been checking my socials from my home computer when I'm at work, which should have been really boring because I have only family and a couple of work friends on there. I try to make this case to her, offering to let her log into all my accounts and check for herself, but she's just calling me a liar and a pervert and all sorts of things. She starts throwing stuff at me, and so things are getting out of hand, and I tell her that if she throws one more thing, I'll have her taken out of this house just like her sister. She swears at me and stomps off to the master bedroom and slams the door. Now, at this point, I am so damn confused I barely know what to think. I head into my office, fire up my desktop, and type bimbo wife Mandy into Google. Sure enough, there is an Instagram, a Twitter, a Reddit even, and of course, an OnlyFans. I click on one of the Instagram links, and up comes a post of an extremely busty woman, like clearly pushing the limits of science and technology, and oh, guess where she's from? Australia. Well, everyone remembers all the nice stuff I was saying about my brother. Guess who was staying with us last Christmas, all the way from Australia? Guess who I told, sure, go ahead and use my office computer to play games if you have jet lag. As far as I can tell, my brother after his wife. And kids went to sleep, logged into either Insta or OnlyFans or something, and was probably paying money to sex with this girl. What a great effing guy. Now, I would love to call my brother and not only confirm my suspicions, but also give him a goddamn earful. But it's like 2 or 3 a.m. there, so it's going to have to wait. But I'm crawling the walls here trying to sort out how I feel about everything. I feel totally let down by everyone. I think to myself, damn, what is this world coming to? For a brief moment, I try to connect the dots between whatever the hell Sarah saw my brother do and what she did with Evelyn, but try as I might. It doesn't really come together. Maybe she's a more tolerant or forgiving person than I am, which is why she didn't confront me when she saw this. But I wish she had. It would have given me an opportunity to directly tell her my whole personal stance on these things, and to even show her how I would act. It might have influenced her in a good way later on, or maybe it wouldn't have mattered. I don't know. All I know is that this post is becoming a novel, and I have blown off most of the morning when I should be working to get this out of my head and onto this page. I feel better for doing it, but there is still probably another 2-3 posts left to tell. I'm not going to post them to this subreddit anymore. I'm not sure that they'd let me, but I will try to quietly update my profile in the next day or two with the rest of the blowout. Talking to my brother, talking to my parents and Sarah's parents, and finally, where Sarah and I stand. One thing that I can say, however, is it seems like most of my immediate family relationships are incredibly strained for various reasons. My parents are largely supportive, but that's becoming less so now that the reality of the financial loss is setting in. Yes, the marriage is still off. That was pretty much a certainty from the get-go. Sarah's parents are a bit more pissed, and I'm sure they are sticking pins in voodoo dolls crafted in my image right now. Evelyn, for people who are wondering, is no longer in jail. She got Sarah to bail her out, and I even laid into Sarah for that, calling her her sister's underling, which I think actually struck a chord with her because she wrote me like a 20-page letter about how her sister always bossed her around throughout her entire childhood. I've read it twice now, and I wish we had talked about this pretty much any time within the last 6 years. Maybe things would be different. I don't know. Anyway, Reddit, if anyone is still interested, expect a final chapter of this saga in like a day or two, and maybe a follow-up after the former wedding date passes. August 10th update. This update has taken longer to get around to than I originally intended. A lot of things have happened over the last couple of days that have kept me pretty busy, and it really wasn't until today, when I had some free time after lunch, that I could sit down and get this out. I'll try to get through as much as I can. Before that, however, I just want to mention a couple of things in response to comments from the last post. I'll try to be brief. Firstly, I don't know much of what's going on with Marty and his divorce, other than, to my knowledge, he's still divorcing her. Obviously, no papers or anything. But the intention is clear. In addition to that, I'm not really in the position to be advocating for any sort of course of action that Marty should take, or offering him legal advice, or assisting him in doing anything to the other man or tracking down the other man's wife, etc. Marty is a grown-ass man, and he can do whatever he wants with the situation, and my position as his friend is just to support him and offer advice if he asks for it. Secondly, this isn't some sort of guerrilla marketing for an OnlyFans girl. If it was, I should have done it on the first post, which hit the front page of Reddit and was seen by over 3 million people. Also, given that this post got so popular on Reddit, it's not really a surprise that bimbo wife Mandy, another Redditor, happened to be following the story and saw her name. It could have easily been any other of the hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of girls who use Reddit to post their pictures. As a brief aside, speaking of Mandy, I have indeed talked to her. She was actually quite helpful in confirming something for me, and as a person, she seems quite nice. But guys, there is no romance planned here in the future. Mandy is married, evidently quite happily so, and for almost 2 decades, I think the handle bimbo wife Mandy should have given that away. And frankly, while her husband must be cool with it, she's way too much for a mere insurance guy like me to handle. Seriously. So with that all out of the way, on to the update. Last time I wrote in, I ended up with me assuming that my brother had used my office computer to chat with Mandy. But it was too late his time for me to contact him. I am one of those guys that, Once a problem is put in front of him, I must be actively working on trying to solve it. This is great for my career choice, but in situations like this, all I was doing was driving myself insane, so I decided to take a deep breath, leave everything until later, and carry on with what I needed to do. First thing up was attempting to contact every person from my side that I had invited to the wedding that I had not yet informed about its cancellation. As you may recall, I had already informed my parents and had them contact my relatives on the day I made up my mind, but only myself and Sarah have the complete guest list, so I needed to do the rest myself. Out of respect for my friends, I decided to call instead of text. But this might have been a bad idea since every phone call typically resulted in a rather lengthy explanation of why I was canceling the wedding. I know I could have given some other excuse, but I wanted people to know that I wasn't being frivolous or just experiencing something inanely like cold feet. It was important not just for my own reputation, but I think in order to show respect to the people who had agreed to come on that day to support myself and Sarah as a couple. Because of this, it wasn't until late into the evening when I finally managed to contact everyone, which meant it was now morning time in Australia. I knew what I needed to do, but I wanted to make sure that my ducks were all in a row, so I took a breather and made a sandwich in the kitchen. I noticed that Sarah wasn't home. I had no idea when she left, and sat down to eat and think about what to do with my brother's situation. Let's call my brother Carl for the sake of shortness here. Now, Carl and I have always been pretty close, despite him being 13 years older than me. He was this sort of quasi-parental figure in my life because by the time I became capable of having long-term memories, he was already well on his way to becoming an adult. He was always generous with his time, played with his little brother when other teenagers would probably have avoided such an activity like the plague, and generally seemed very mature and wise to me growing up. Suffice it to say, I respected him greatly. The idea that he had been sexting with a girl who wasn't his wife in my house was something that I was still coming to grips with, and I needed to decide what to do. Talking to him about it was obvious, but at this point, given how much of a shambles my relationship with Sarah was, I didn't know if I cared about having him confess just for the sake of clearing my name. Was there anything to salvage anyway? I needed to, for my own sake of propriety at least, yell at him about this and convince him to stop. However, I wasn't sure if I was going to rat him out or not to my sister-in-law. Let's call her Karen. All right, Carl and Karen it is, guys. It all depended on what he told me and if I believed him or not. I finished my meal and logged into Facebook and video called Carl. Now, Carl works mostly from home as a remote office worker since his field is related to it, and he's almost always available during the day, and today was no exception. It didn't even ring more than once or twice before he answered. We greeted each other, exchanged some pleasantries, and then I just sort of dove into it and asked him if he had been using my computer to sex chat with women on the internet when he was visiting me. Carl's face froze, and he leaned over out of the frame of the camera. He was obviously closing his office door. Yeah, I did. Why? He said to me. I swore under my breath and explained to Carl how Sarah had thought that his flirting was me since he used my computer. I explained that I wasn't happy to take the hit for him, and I asked him point blank if Karen knew about this or not. He waffled for a few seconds, stumbling over his words, and then looked a bit sheepish and said that, no, Karen didn't know, and he'd prefer if it was kept that way. He went on to explain that their relationship had been pretty rough since their youngest was born 4 years ago, mainly in the bedroom department. Carl had always been a pretty private person, especially when it came to intimate details, or at least he had always been that way when talking to his much younger baby brother. However, this time he just let it all lay out. Things had been bad. He had been tired of getting rejected. Karen was always tired no matter what he did or how much he helped out around the house. Eventually, this led to problems on his side, some sort of performance anxiety on the few occasions where Karen would actually feel up for some bedroom fun, and things just got worse from there. Basically, he said, there's no amount of socks picked up, laundry folded, dishes washed, or time spent minding children that would get me laid. It was just not happening. So I started to spend time in my office at night, working. He even did the finger quotes when saying this. Evidently, his working at night turned into a pretty hardcore addiction to OnlyFans sites, which, given the relative privacy he had in his office for legitimate work, spiraled out of control pretty quickly. I asked him if he was still doing it, and he swore up and down that he wasn't. I thought I believed him when he said it. He seemed to be sincere, but I just had this niggling feeling in the back of my skull that something was off. Maybe it was because of all the deceit I had encountered recently, but I was doubting my own brother, who has really been a stand-up guy to me our entire lives together. I really hated being in this situation. Now, the problem I faced was pretty complex here. First, if I wanted to clear my name, then I would have to get my brother to tell Sarah that it was him all along. However, if he did that, then there was no guarantee that Sarah wouldn't spitefully inform Karen. I personally thought it would be best if Karen knew, but at the same time, I didn't know if I felt comfortable potentially dropping a nuke on my brother's marriage over something he not only said he stopped but is in this sort of moral gray area for me. I didn't have an answer right away as to what to do, but I did urge him to tell his wife about this and to get into marriage counseling. He said that they actually had been going for the last 6 months, and while it was helpful, what had really helped him was getting a prescription for some generic Viagra. I actually did a spit take at that, neatly spraying my computer screen with water. He told me that they had been trying to make sure they have intimate time at least a couple of times a week. And the Viagra had cured him of his performance anxiety to the point where now they were both looking forward to spending time together after the kids went to bed. The general gist of this was something along the lines of, "Hey, this is actually going in the right direction now. Please don't screw this up for us." I really didn't want to be in this position, not just for the sake of Carl and Karen, but for my 2 nieces as well. And if what Carl was telling me was the truth, I could be tossing a firebomb into a relationship that was starting to mend. It was unpredictable what would happen. So yeah, it may disappoint some people, but at the time, I felt that the best option I had was to wait and see. I was, after all, going to meet him in a couple of weeks in the flesh, and once I got him alone in a room and a few drinks into him, I was going to definitely get to the bottom of this. It seemed like the best course of action. Anyway, that night, I went to bed early. I didn't see Sarah until the next morning. She looked haggard, like she had a distinct lack of sleep. I asked her where she had been, mostly out of habit after all. We had been together for almost 6 years. She told me that she had gone down to the courthouse for Evelyn's arraignment to post bail. The courts here close at 1:00 p.m. on the weekends, which is why she had disappeared soon after I went into my office, and that afterward, she had driven her to her parents' house and spent the night. She made a point of telling me how horrible it was to have to explain to her parents that I had called off the wedding. I asked her if her parents knew the reason why, and she barked, "Of course they do." I tried to remain calm, but by this point in this ordeal, I was losing it. I bit back at her. "Are you going to move back there so that they have both girls at home now?" It was childish and petty, but the fact that she bailed Evelyn out of jail annoyed me to no end. "You don't need to be an ass about this," she said, to which I said, "And you don't need to be Evelyn's underling." I could see Sarah visibly flinch when I said that to her. It obviously had struck a chord, and the corners of her eyes started to tear up, and I cooled my temper. We just sort of stood there, miles apart in the living room of our house, and didn't say anything for a good solid minute or two until Sarah decided to continue talking. "Our parents are going to be here at 3. I actually facepalmed at this. I was about to go off on her for not consulting me on this, but decided that was just my own ego. After all, I did need to sit down with them and work out the details around the wedding and whatever remaining deposit we had, and I needed to at least once face-to-face explain to everyone why it wasn't happening. So fine, let's do this and get it out of the way. I tried to make myself busy, but there isn't much you can do on a Sunday except waste time. And time wasting isn't very enjoyable when you know you are heading into the meat grinder in just a few hours. Still, 3 p.m. came, and so did our parents. We all sat down at the large kitchen table that Sarah had bought just a month after we closed on the house. It was second-hand from Facebook Marketplace, but she loved it because it was solid oak with a beautiful finish and capable of seating 8, and just as heavy as that sounds. She always wanted to have big dinner parties with our families over, just not like this. The next 3 hours were grueling. No one was happy, nor should they be. I guess the best support I could get came, unsurprisingly, from my own parents, but even that was tempered essentially along the lines of, "Well, it's his decision to make," which more or less means, "Yeah, we think this is crazy too, but we're still backing him." Honestly, that was fine with me. I didn't need my parents to get the stigma by association of canceling the wedding. I was fine with owning that. Eventually, we worked out a decent deal in regards to the wedding. We would try to get back whatever money we could, split it back however it was contributed. Some things like the honeymoon were all paid by me, or the flowers were all paid for by Sarah's parents, and then eat whatever losses there were communally. However, when it came to the subject of the house, Sarah vehemently objected to my idea of paying back her or her parents for the deposit. Basically, she didn't intend to move. Now, as you might imagine, Sarah and I hadn't really talked about the us living together situation in too much detail. The fact that I even brought up settling the house equity seemed to shock her, because the implication here is that I expect her to move out of our home. She threw a fit, and I don't blame her. I should have settled our relationship status with her first before trying to negotiate a payment plan with her parents. It really tipped my hand to everyone about how I was feeling about our relationship, and while I think our parents expected it or at least understood, Sarah was beside herself. She was absolutely not accepting of us breaking up over this. And she made it clear, "I am not moving out of my house and we are not breaking up," she declared. And that's pretty much how my Sunday night ended. After our parents left, Sarah and I tried to talk it out some more, but we kept running in circles around each other. And I had to curb my natural inclination to run her down until we got a resolution. Truthfully, I was pretty damn tired as well, and I just wanted to turn off my brain. Believe it or not, we just ended up sitting on the couch and watching a movie together in silence until it was time to go to sleep. We left it there with a "we'll talk about it more tomorrow" and retreated to our separate rooms. On Monday, I woke up to a large handwritten letter slid under the door from Sarah. I took a brief look at the first few pages and decided I would deal with it later and went to work. When I left, Sarah was still in bed. She must have been up late writing that letter. At the office, I rescheduled some meetings and started calling venues and vendors that were on my list. The other ones were being handled by Sarah or her parents. It was a mixed bag of results. The catering people were adamant that I pay most of their fees under the pretense that they had ordered most of the food. I shot back at them over this, like, were they expecting me to eat a week-old steak? But my appeal fell on deaf ears. I tried talking to the woman who ran the catering business and explaining what happened, but that seemed to only firm up her resolve to get as much money as possible out of me. Inversely, the DJ that I had hired for the entertainment was incredibly kind and gave us back almost all of the money. It wasn't much. However, things went on like this, and during the day between making calls and doing work, I read Sarah's letter. Now this is 20 pages of written words, so I'm just going to summarize. The gist of it was that ever since childhood, Sarah has been bullied by Evelyn, and in response, Sarah's way of dealing with this was to essentially go along with whatever Evelyn wants or wants to hear. She went on to say that it had become sort of a general way of operating in her life, that she was just afraid to rock the boat, to cause a problem, or sometimes even to voice an opinion. I reflected on this because, truthfully, when I look back at our relationship with a more critical eye, I kind of think that Sarah was a bit too perfect of a girlfriend. What I mean by that is she never disagreed with me, never picked her plans over mine, or even really advocated too strongly against anything I wanted to do. She went out of her way to make herself appear useful, and all around acted more or less like a yes woman in our relationship. I mean, we had never even so much as had a minor disagreement in 6 years, let alone a full-blown argument until now. It sounds great from a relationship standpoint until, of course, it's not. I couldn't shake this feeling that Sarah has this deep-seated insecurity and need to make people happy. You know what they call people-pleasing behavior? When I start looking at it this way, a lot of things make sense to me. And I start to realize that despite being with Sarah for 6 years, I don't actually know her that well. It's like she's put up this image around her, which is really just a mirror, a reflection of whatever she thinks people want to see. And in the case of our relationship, she's more or less been acting my role of the perfect girlfriend, while never really letting me inside to see who she is as a person. Hell, I can't even say that what I saw in those text messages is the real Sarah, because it's almost certainly just another reflection, this time of Evelyn and all her warts and faults. This may sound weird, but it's like we are in this unequal relationship, whereas maybe she loves me for who I am and how I wear my thoughts on my face and my heart on my sleeve. But maybe I only love her for the mirror she is holding up to my face. I don't know if this sounds too metaphysical for you, then I'm right there as well. It's like this wisp of an idea that I'm still trying to catch by my fingertips. All I know is that in the last few days, I've probably learned more about Sarah than I had in the last 6 years, and the letter she wrote me was the first real view into her childhood that I had glimpsed. That night, we talked more about this, specifically about her childhood, about her behavior. The conclusion that we came to is that she needs help. She's a grown woman who is, sadly, stuck acting like a child, too scared to displease anyone lest she face her sister's wrath or her parents' disapproval or the loss of love from the ones she loves. This is no way to have a relationship, and I can say that I feel much more confident and assured that my decision to call off the wedding was the correct one. In fact, it could not be any more correct. That night, after our talk, I went to bed with much less angst than I had in a few days. So this basically brings me up to our last update, and once again, it's a freaking novel. I won't wait 2-3 days to do another one, otherwise, I will keep falling forever. For people who have been wondering, the entire situation with my brother is more or less resolved, and I'll get to that tomorrow. But the situation with Sarah and I is still up in the air a bit. But there is a semblance of a plan going forward. I promise I'll get to it as soon as I can, but as you can imagine, there is a lot to write, and I can only do what I can do. Thanks. August 31 update. Sorry this update took so long to get around to, but to be blunt, after the chaos that happened initially started to die down and my state of hypervigilance started to dwindle, I found myself sinking into a deep depressive funk that sapped most of my will to do almost anything. and recounting the show that is my life became really, really unappealing. However, the date for the wedding has now come and gone, and I'm on vacation with my siblings and my brother's family and starting to really feel like most of this is behind me. So anyway, on to the updates. First off, since this is the thing that seems to really bother people, my brother and his wife are doing fine. Like I said in my last post, I urged my brother to tell Karen about his, sexting with the Australian girl known as bimbo wife Mandy, who, by the way, is a very lovely person. I sort of hinted in my last update that I had gotten confirmation from Mandy to back up my brother's story, and according to her, the timelines matched up, and not only that, but his OnlyFans account no longer exists. Now, she could be lying to me to protect a customer, but I don't think that's the case, and she seemed like a genuine person. My brother, for his part, did tell his wife what had happened in one of their marriage counseling sessions, and according to him, she took it pretty well and is treating it as water under the bridge. I did pull her aside last week and asked her if she was really okay with this, and she told me, I'll have to paraphrase this a bit, we're not as squeaky clean as you think. Both of us watch porn, and that's basically what I consider this to be. It's not like he was going to run off and have an affair with her. I asked her if she would feel the same way if he had visited a prostitute. It's legal where they live, and she said no, she wouldn't. But he didn't, so I guess that's their clear line. It's a bit different from mine and a lot of really, really loud people on Reddit, but if the noises I heard coming from their hotel room last night are any indication, they are doing fine. And their dead bedroom situation is totally resolved. Honestly, these two are borderline taking advantage right now. Since my sister is taking the place of Sarah, they switched rooms with her, and now the kids are with her. And they are both little girls and love having a sleepover with their auntie. And they have 2 babysitters who are happy to take the kids while they run off and do Lord knows what, we know what, but let's not talk about it. Overall, I think I did the right thing in giving him the space to make this right on his own, even though people hounded me for it. I will strongly argue that the situation with my brother and the situation with Evelyn were like comparing night and day. I don't agree that cybering someone you know is a professional sex worker is anywhere near the same ballpark as actively carrying on an affair. And I don't think my actions and how I dealt with it were anything close to how Sarah did. Like I said in my previous post, she not only hid the affair from Marty, she actively engaged in disparaging conversations about him and said several other things that I won't recount here for various reasons. Suffice it to say, I feel good about this choice on my part, and people who don't agree with me can put their heads in an oven for all I care. Next up, I think, is the wedding itself. There isn't much to say here. Sarah and I and our families lost our shirt on it, but that was expected. I forced the caterer who had ordered all that food to either give me back a bigger refund or give me the food, and she chose the latter, which is fair enough. We now have a lot of frozen steak, chicken, and fish. It was delivered to my parents' house, and I think they are passing it out to interested parties. Likewise, some wedding gifts from faraway relatives arrived and are at my house until we can send them back. But overall, the date just came and passed, and for the sake of both of our sanities, Sarah and I spent it apart. As for the issue with Marty and Evelyn, I don't think this is something that is going to be settled anytime soon. Marty is absolutely divorcing Evelyn, but it's difficult for him primarily because she's making it difficult by begging him to reconsider. On top of that, school is starting again, and so Marty will be back with his students instead of taking care of their daughter every day. I think that's really hurting him right now because spending every day with his parents and his kid was really helping him mentally. Also, despite what some people have wished for, Marty hasn't made a big stink about this at Evelyn's work, despite the fact that he probably could get them both fired, since it became obvious that they were using work trips to hook up on the company's dime. Nor has he gone and told Jake's wife about the affair either, something I strongly disagree with. When I questioned him about it, all he said is that he's in no big hurry. After all, he has the text messages, the photos from the pub, and the video he took when he entered the house. Basically, he could bury this guy whenever he wants to. I think in some kind of twisted way, hippy-dippy Marty, the Birkenstock-wearing teacher, is enjoying making this guy sweat it out. Either that, or maybe he's enjoying making Evelyn fully realize her place in the world at this point, just a side piece to a married man. I'm not sure, but Marty has definitely gotten a bit darker over this whole thing, not that I can blame him. Everything I know about Evelyn is secondhand from Sarah, but the way I understand it, she is largely just going to work and coming straight back to her parents' house every day like a teenager on curfew. I don't think they are pleased with either of their daughters right now, but oddly enough, even though the implosion of Sarah's and my wedding was extremely public, I think that it's being drowned out by the constant drama that is Evelyn's impending divorce. Sarah said it almost seemed like they forgot about her once they realized that Marty was seriously taking steps to divorce Evelyn, and their concern about having access to their granddaughter. I sort of get that. They are very doting grandparents, and I'm sure their anger at Evelyn is compounded by the fact that their access to their grandchild is going to be essentially cut in half now. On to the big event, Sarah and I. First off, I don't think that this update is likely to make anyone happy, not the people who urged me to yeet her out of my life, nor the people who demand that I treat her with sympathy and compassion for her obviously screwed up mental issues. The facts are that, aside from the lying and hiding the affair, what shook me the most was probably the way that she carried on with her sister in those text messages. Maybe people would understand me better if I shared them, but I simply refuse to repeat it, and I don't want to get into arguments over their content. Suffice it to say, it was enough for me to reconsider Sarah's complete character, which is largely where I am at today, still considering it. That's not to say that we are still together, not in the way we were as an engaged couple, but we haven't completely closed the door on the relationship either. I've come to understand a bit more about what kind of person Sarah is and which parts of her are genuine and which parts are facsimiles constructed in order for her to ingratiate herself to people, her sister included. Basically, it helps to be able to put a name to what is going on with her, this people-pleasing behavior. It helps more to understand how it started, her family, with copious examples retold to me, and it further helps that she is actively seeking help for it. On top of that, even though I found her behavior extremely gross and inappropriate, I give her a lot of credit for how she dealt with the situation when I came home that night to find her and Evelyn on our couch. She didn't lie, she didn't minimize, and she largely took accountability for what she did. Remember, at the time, she didn't know that I had seen her text messages with Evelyn, and she definitely could have tried to omit her participation or minimize it some way, but she didn't. She was truthful to me, even when she knew it would make her look bad. That actually counts for a lot in my book, which is why I'm looking at simply changing the chapter instead of closing it. To be clear, this isn't a victory for the forgive her and blame everything on the sister crowd because frankly I haven't forgiven her, and our situation is very different now. She has moved back into her old room at her parents' house, much like Evelyn, although Sarah will probably be out of there in a couple of weeks because she says the environment is not good for her mental health or getting help with her issues. And I am paying back her equity in the house in fortnightly installments out of my pay until we are all caught up, which will help her defray the costs of getting an apartment on her own. We are definitely not together right now. Sarah really did not want to accept this at first, and I can see her point of view, even be sympathetic to it, but also, if she really has these emotional problems that it appears she does, then I felt that pushing the issue could be the way to light a fire under her pants to get her to finally seek some real help for them. And just forgiving her would be tantamount to sweeping everything under the rug, which, in the long run, would spell disaster for our relationship. I really wish that she had opened up to me earlier, before all of this hit the fan, because I'd much rather handle the problem as a loving partner and support her more closely. But she didn't really give me the opportunity to do that, which is a shame. So this is the best I can do at this point. So basically, my situation is more or less just wait and see on the Sarah front. Maybe one or both of us will get tired of this and completely throw in the towel and move on completely. It could almost certainly be me, but frankly, I have no desire to further complicate my life by being intimate with any other woman right now. So I think if anything, we're looking at a period of months down the line here until we get a firm resolution one way or another on this front, and I'm frankly fine with that. Not everything needs to progress at a hyper-emotional breakneck pace, and if I look at my situation, I'm fine. Financially, we're separated, we're not living together, and I'm cautiously cynical about the entire situation. I'm also not kidding myself if at any point I think that Sarah's issues are too big of a deal or that I can't see us rebuilding trust with each other, then I will dip. I have no interest in prolonging a situation that I see as hopeless, which I guess says it all. I don't think it's hopeless, I just think it's going to be difficult, and I'm open to waiting a bit to see how it plays out. To the point even where I am seeking my own counselor to help me process the events of the last few weeks, as well as looking into how Sarah and I interacted with each other. Because I do actually believe that while I might have been fooled by her, it was partially a willing deception on my part because who wouldn't love a girlfriend who never disagrees with them, always wants to do what they do, and goes out of her way to make sure you're happy before she is? The thing I'm struggling with, and maybe Sarah as well, is how much of that is genuine love she has for me, and how much of it is just a deeply ingrained need to please other people born out of her fear of rejection and anxiety. I guess, barring throwing in the towel, when we reach the bottom of that question, we'll know the answer to Sarah's and my relationship. I know it's not the update that everyone wanted, but it's all I got. Maybe check this space in a few months and see how it played out. Once again, thanks to everyone who sent me supportive messages, and axe on the rest of you. Laugh out loud December 5th update. It was almost 2 months ago when I made my original post about my former fiancée reaching out to me, asking for help in regard to an issue in her family. I think some people had some decent advice in that thread, and it really helped me clarify my own thoughts on the matter. Basically, my distrust in the sincerity of Sarah's intentions was both probably overblown on my part, as well as immaterial to what I really should be doing as a friend to both her and Marty. In regard to Sarah, I think that it was very apparent to me that her relationship with me wasn't as important of a motivator in her actions as I was selfishly assuming. She still has, to be honest, a huge beef with her sister, and feels incredibly horrible about not just her part in Marty's current situation, but how the upheaval has affected her 3-year-old niece. Add on to that a lifetime of family resentment, and I think she was keen to do something, anything, to screw over Evelyn. Who wouldn't be? Her reaching out to me was more or less because out of all the people she knows, I would be the one most likely to help and offer good advice. I'll admit to being overly cynical of her trying to use the situation to appear like she was making amends to people and working on her issues, but upon reflection, I realized that not everything in her life revolved around me or our relationship. Basically, I need to chill on being distrustful of people when they are finally doing what I would be liking them to do. Lesson learned: for anyone who has felt betrayed, you can rob yourself of positive emotions by living in the past and not the present. As for Marty, given that Sarah had given me the heads up about her sister and parents' plot to try and file a false report accusing him of child abuse, I was 100% dead set on informing him as soon as I could, regardless of Sarah's desire to be more subtle. That being said, I did make one last-ditch effort to get Sarah to be the one to reach out and do this, as I thought it might help her mend her relationship with her soon-to-be former brother-in-law and help the process of making amends to both him and her niece. As I guessed, her hesitancy, as well as why she wanted my help, was because her parents were more or less fully on board with this plan, and she wasn't quite emotionally strong enough to deal with any potential fallout from them, particularly since she had spent her entire life being bullied by her family. And to make matters worse, she was at their mercy since she was living with them. We discussed it, and I gave her a promise that if this came back to her, that I would get her a place to live if she needed it. She asked me if I would go with her when she faced Marty, and I almost said yes out of habit, but I declined. I told her that I thought it would be better for everyone if she faced this one alone, and she reluctantly agreed. Obviously, I wasn't there when Sarah and Marty met, but I do know it took place at his parents' house. His parents obviously knew about Sarah's role in covering up for Evelyn's infidelity, and there were some choice words pointed at her, fair enough. Sarah told Marty about the plot, then they called Marty's lawyer, and she gave a statement. For all the drama preceding it, the meeting was over as quickly as that. One thing that Sarah did say, however, is that she was grateful that Marty let her play with her niece. He didn't have to do that, but it meant a lot to her. I could literally hear the sorrow in her voice, to the point where I had a fleeting thought that maybe Sarah is carrying too much of a burden on her shoulders for what, ultimately, were Evelyn's actions. To be frank, I don't know how to address this or if I should. I'll try to finish this up quickly since there is a word limit. Several weeks passed. My offer of a place to stay wasn't needed. Sarah managed to get her own apartment not too long after we spoke. Although I did speed up the money I was paying her back by a couple of weeks to help facilitate this. Anyway, shortly after she moved out, Evelyn finally made her move. I don't want to get into exactly what she accused Marty of, but it was pretty vile, as in something that could get you killed in prison if it was true. Frankly, I was shocked when I heard it, because as despicable as Evelyn is, I never thought she was that horrid, nor her parents, who seemingly went along with this. As you can imagine, there was an emergency child custody hearing in front of a judge that night, and as they were discussing the charges, Marty's lawyer pulls out a dated and notarized affidavit from Sarah detailing the plot as well as a recorded interview on a USB stick. Now, I would love to say that Evelyn ended up in jail or driven out of town or got her just desserts in some other way, but in truth, we don't know yet. She has some charges against her from this stunt, and I'm not privy to what they are, but in all likelihood I don't have much hope that she'll get more than a slap on the wrist, since otherwise our prisons would be filled with acrimonious divorcees. That being said, the custody hearing did not go Evelyn's way, and now there is a court order in place granting Marty primary custody, and Evelyn must have a court-ordered observer with her when she visits their kid. This order will be in place until the divorce is finalized, which might be coming up soon because I think getting caught out so badly has taken a lot of the wind out of Evelyn's sails to make this divorce difficult. Marty says that her lawyer has been in contact about discussing a settlement, which is a positive sign. And that's pretty much where we are today. As you can imagine, Sarah is pretty much persona non grata with her family right now, and that's not likely to change, even though it is the holidays. She accepted that this would likely be the fact if she went ahead and gave a statement, so she says she was prepared for it, but I can tell that even though her family has largely treated her like dog shit for most of her life, it still pains her to have contact cut like this. She jokes to me that it's helping her get past her issues with them, but I can tell it still hurts. A lot of people who know about my backstory here will probably be pissed about this, but I rather impulsively offered for Sarah to help me spend my parents' airline miles and travel with me to Australia to visit my brother and his family. I honestly didn't think she would accept because she's a teacher, and they're not quite on break yet, but she surprised me. My brother has a very large property in semi-rural Queensland with a few bungalows on it. We cleaned out the snakes yesterday, and Sarah and I are neighbors who are looking forward to doing some surfing on Christmas Day. Our relationship is still very much complicated, hence the separate accommodations, but I have to admit that I am feeling better about things in general. My biggest issue with Sarah and why I canceled our wedding was because I didn't understand how she could act how she did with her sister. Now, knowing the backstory here between the two, and furthermore seeing her literally torch that relationship with the fury of 1,000 suns, it's hard for me to still be seriously worried about Evelyn's influence on her. It would require a degree of paranoia that not only I don't possess, but one that would probably qualify as a mental illness. Still, we're both taking it slow. To be frank, we're in this sort of weird, exclusive, platonic relationship. It obviously can't last, and while Sarah has made it pretty clear how she would like to resolve the situation, I'm being a bit shy. It's not like I don't love her, that hasn't really been an issue. I can't even say that it's not that I don't trust her, since most of the reasons why I felt that way have been excised like a tumor. It's just that I am unsure about the trajectory of our relationship. I'm not hankering to rush back to the altar anytime soon, and I think most of my friends would disown me if I did, given that I just canceled a wedding at the last moment a few months ago. Sarah knows this, and she's been largely accepting of it, but even if she tells me that she doesn't care about getting married, I can't help but feel like she secretly does. I guess the best way for me to explain my thinking is that the relationship we had, which had put us on the path to marriage, is done and gone. Maybe we will make another one that will head in that same direction someday, but I'm no longer sure that this is something I want. And it's not just Sarah, it's with anyone. I guess all of the marital problems I've seen this last half year have left a bad taste in my mouth. In any case, whatever future we do have together will have to accommodate these feelings, and I want to be certain that I'm not wasting her time or leading her on. I guess time will tell. Anyway, thanks to the 5 people who are still invested in my crappy life story. If something else interesting or exciting happens, I'll probably post it on my profile. It's been a wild ride, but all of the support I've gotten from the broader Reddit community has been awesome. Thanks again. Edit, I just found out something today from Sarah that I didn't know, but I feel is pretty relevant to the discussion. Basically, Marty's lawyer presented a lot more evidence than just Sarah's testimony. They had also had his kid screened and examined by 2 different psychologists within the week that they had first found out about the impending accusations. During this process, some stuff came out. Basically, their daughter caught Evelyn and AP in flagrante delicto at their home multiple times. Her mom was giving her ice cream to not say anything. Marty's lawyer read some from a transcript of one of the psychologist's interviews and, well, I will just say the phrase big wee-wee came up. This poor kid. No one deserves a mother like that. Now, the fact that she only gets court-supervised visitation makes a lot of sense. Sarah says that it sounds like she just saw them doing it a couple of times, not that he did anything to her. Needless to say, I think Evelyn is in the royal shithouse right now. I'm surprised her parents haven't booted her ass from their home.
My wife, Alana, and I were dining at a fancy restaurant when I spotted my oldest and closest friend approaching our table. I discreetly informed my wife about it, mentioning that Terrence Landis was coming over. I reminded her that he had been my best friend since 2nd grade, but advised her to be cautious around him, given his reputation as a ladies' man. Thankfully, Alana replied softly, assuring me that she would be fine. I then asked her about Terrence, noting that he was the wealthy friend I had mentioned before. I nodded in her direction and rose to greet Terrence, who embraced me tightly, though the gesture felt a bit awkward in such a public place. Terrence expressed his joy at seeing me again, mentioning that it had been a while since we hung out. He seemed to have a particular interest in Alana, and inquired if she was my lovely wife. He also mentioned that he had sent a gift when we got married in Singapore, hoping we enjoyed it. Alana, quite excited, brought up the pickup truck he had gifted me, and offered a hug. I introduced her to Terrence, explaining their connection. Terrence then politely but firmly pulled me aside to embrace Alana. In her usual outgoing manner, Alana commented on his tall and handsome appearance and hugged him for a bit longer than I thought was suitable for a married woman. Curious about Terrence's presence in Daytona, I asked why he was there. Terrence explained that he had purchased a condo in the Dunes and was currently renovating it. He mentioned that he was staying at a local hotel and had come to the restaurant for dinner alone. Alana, always inquisitive, remarked on his condo purchase, expressing her surprise that he was renovating it since the condos were practically new. She couldn't fathom what needed changing. Terrence agreed with her, explaining that the bedrooms felt cramped to him and he had taken the opportunity to buy a free penthouse. He planned to paint it and get new furniture. It was evident that Terrence was making an effort to impress Alana, who was particularly materialistic. Despite my decent income and savings, she seemed determined to spend us into financial trouble. We were celebrating our 3rd anniversary, but her attention was primarily on Terrence, which didn't escape the notice of onlookers who looked at me sympathetically. I suggested that we focus on each other again as the waiter brought our food. Alana didn't argue, but intensified her focus on our steaks. Alana insisted that Terrence should join us, as my best friend was also her friend. Terrence hesitated, mentioning that he didn't want to intrude on our romantic dinner. However, Alana quickly intervened, instructing the waiter to set the table for Terrence, who was joining us for dinner. The waiter swiftly attended to it, and in no time, Terrence was seated at our table, dominating the conversation. I managed to win a game of solitaire on my phone, while he and Alana chatted about various topics. I didn't pay much attention to their conversation until Alana addressed me. She suggested that we had 2 spare rooms and that we should invite Terrence to stay with us, allowing us to catch up. Although she mentioned he could try her home-cooked meals, I suspected she'd order expensive takeout from fancy restaurants instead. I was taken aback by her suggestion and had my doubts about whether Terrence would appreciate her cooking. My first wife, Helen, passed away after 22 years of marriage. She and Terrence were close friends, and I never worried about their friendship because Helen was devoted and trustworthy. Sadly, she passed away suddenly from a heart attack 5 years ago. I mourned for over a year before meeting Alana at a charity event. Despite the 11-year age difference, we eventually got married, and we've been together for 3 years now. Alana had been divorced before, claiming her first husband cheated on her. I was committed to never cheating on my wife, and Alana knew it. It seemed that Alana had no trouble convincing Terrence to stay with us, and I suspected her revealing attire played a part in it. Terrence didn't have to wake up early for work, which was a luxury reserved for those without millions in the bank. Alana hadn't worked since her first divorce, and she had me sign a prenuptial agreement stating I wouldn't touch her money, no matter how long we were married. This suited me fine, as I had a stable income from my investments and a good job. When I arrived home on Monday night, Alana and Terrence appeared even closer than they were at the restaurant the night before. Dinner was prepared and exceptionally tasty, but I noticed the trash can filled with containers from a local restaurant. Terrence and Alana were so engrossed in their own world that they didn't even notice when I left the living room, climbed the stairs, and went to bed. Their lack of attention didn't make me feel awkward. I was quite surprised when I got home on Wednesday evening and found Alana seemingly waiting for me. She was sitting on an expensive sofa, which, in my opinion, was a bit too close, especially for a friend. The man she had recently met was Terrence. Alana's opening statement was that we needed to have a conversation. Once again, I was taken aback. It was just a regular Wednesday, and I couldn't help but wonder how Terrence had worked his magic so swiftly. I knew he was skilled at everything he pursued, but this was incredibly impressive, and I knew it would cost me. Alana explained that Terrence and I had discovered a strong connection, one we hadn't intended for, but couldn't deny. She informed me that she was going to divorce me as soon as it was possible, and that she planned to marry Terrence. She requested that I not try to dissuade her, emphasizing that she wouldn't give up her home and half her savings just because I couldn't stay faithful, and Terrence couldn't keep his actions in check. I responded with determination that surprised even myself, stating that I would fight her every step of the way. Alana, in response, expressed disdain and labeled my reaction as typical of someone who's insecure. She clarified that she didn't marry me for my money and didn't want it when we divorced. Both Terrence and Alana believed that the divorce process would be smoother if she left with the money she brought into the marriage. She demanded to know if this was enough incentive for a quick divorce. In a sly manner, I replied, asking her where she wanted me to sign, knowing that money meant more to her than to me. Alana insisted that she would spend the next few nights with Terrence while they waited for his apartment to be painted, and she made it clear that she didn't want to hear any complaints, whining, crying, or grumbling. I simply nodded and turned, heading to the nearest bar. It's incredible how quickly a divorce can proceed through the legal process when all three parties involved are motivated, especially when one of them is quite wealthy. A few months later, I was a single man once more. The weekend after the divorce was finalized, I returned to the same restaurant where I had first met Alana and found Terrence sitting at a two-person table. I walked over and joined him. Terrence wondered whether he should publicly praise me or wait for a more private setting. I expressed my lack of composure, suggesting that I didn't understand how he could be so cheerful. I mentioned that he shouldn't have proposed to Alana, as she could potentially come after him for various reasons like infidelity, breach of contract, outright deception, or just being rude. Terrence, in his usual calm manner, assured me that such things wouldn't happen. He suggested that I wasn't seeing the big picture and encouraged me to enlighten him. He also mentioned that he knew Alana and described her as stubborn, vengeful, and quite cunning. I asked Terrence with a chuckle whether he had felt differently when he proposed to her. I asked him to consider what the final straw was that made him decide to get rid of her. I admitted that I wasn't entirely sure, but I mentioned that it might have had something to do with the fact that her personal trainer was seeing her 3 times a week, and for some reason, it bothered me. I explained that the thought of filing for divorce, even for infidelity, was unappealing because she would have received half of everything plus alimony. I added that this was why I had turned to him for help, expressing my surprise at his ability to persuade her to ask for a divorce by Wednesday. I commented that it was incredible and noted that his persuasive skills must have improved over the years. Terrence confessed that it had more to do with how his portfolio had grown over the years. He explained that once she realized how much money he had, she was able to seduce him instantly. He admitted that he would miss her in bed and mentioned that making love to my wife had been one of the highlights of his life. I said seriously that her unique talent drew me into this whole scheme. I acknowledged that Terrence did an excellent job freeing me from that money-hungry woman, but I wondered why he didn't care about how she'd react to being left without ever getting married. I suggested she might figure out the entire plan, given her conniving nature and cleverness. Terrence explained that he had the big picture in mind when he gave Alana a weekend at the Ritz, complete with a spa day as an engagement gift. I retorted, calling him a fool, and reminding him that Alana's personal trainer was now a masseuse at the Ritz, raising the possibility that she might have run into him. Terrence admitted that he had booked the spa for her and shared that he had visited her the previous night to see how delighted she was with his gift. He mentioned that he had a key to the room and that his phone was set up for video. I processed the situation and inquired if she had been with her former personal trainer, asking if there was a video and if she had cheated on him. I wondered if Terrence had been upset enough to call off the engagement. Terrence replied with a grin, stating that Alana was devastated by his unyielding stance, and it was the first time she'd ever done something like that. He assured me that it wouldn't happen again. I mentioned that I was on the same page as her in not being affected by the situation. Currently, Alana was out shopping, giving back the gifts I had given her, and there were tears and angry words involved. Terrence added with a big grin that I owed him dinner for convincing her to say she wanted a divorce on Wednesday. I acknowledged his efforts, saying he had saved me a lot of money, and that I'd love to treat him to dinner because he had always had my back, unlike Alana, who didn't understand what real friendship meant. Story 2. I'm Frank Grimes, and my wife is Peggy. We've been married for 2 decades and have 2 children, Mike and Emma. I'm returning home after dropping off Emma at university, and I'm looking forward to discussing my wife's affairs over the past 12 years. Her latest affair is the most serious, and now that our kids are gone, she wants to leave me for her lover. As I turn onto our street, I spot our house with the lights on, indicating she's home. I pull into the driveway, get out of the car, open the front door, and walk in. My wife sits on the couch, looking somewhat anxious, though I've never even raised my voice at her, let alone my hand. She glances at me and then at the 2 suitcases near the door. I focus on them too. Peggy, my wife, has left to take Emma to her first year at university. I'm sitting on the couch, waiting for my lover to pick me up. My suitcases are packed, and I've left Frank a note explaining my departure for another man. But my lover is running late, and I'm anxious about what might happen if Frank returns home first. My current lover is just the latest in a series of lovers I've had over the past 12 years. But this one is special, and we're deeply in love. I reflect on my past affairs during this time. My first lover was my tennis coach at the country club. He was attentive and caring, but he left without a word. Next was a work colleague, and our affair started on a business trip to New York, fueled by too much drink. It continued for over 2 years, mostly during company trips and late nights in his office. Then he vanished, rumored to have run off with a younger woman. After that, an old college friend and I rekindled our affair at a charity sale, which lasted 6 months. The most recent affair is with Tom, my best friend's husband. It began with innocent flirting at a barbecue and evolved into a passionate love affair. Now I'm waiting for him to pick me up, but he's running late, and I'm growing anxious. Peggy, were you planning to leave with Tom, or did you intend to tell me about him? I point to a note on the table with my wedding rings placed on it. Frank picks up the note, drops my rings on the floor, and reads it. Dear Frank, as you can see, I left you for another man. It doesn't matter who. I love him and he loves me. We are going far away. Please don't try to find me. We had a good marriage and good times, but we've grown apart in recent years. It's time to say goodbye. Frank reads the note, smiles, and puts it in his briefcase. Then he turns to me and thanks me for the note, saying it will make things easier. He mentions a video of me with Tom in our bed, and I'm bewildered. Frank reveals that he's known about my affairs from the start and had me under surveillance. He shares that he got rid of my lovers to maintain a stable family for our children and avoid financial consequences in a divorce. Frank, let me share a little story with you. Back in elementary school, my closest friend was a boy named George Vanoni. He was a small kid who often got picked on, but I'd always step in to protect him, even if it meant taking a beating myself. Eventually, the school realized that messing with him meant dealing with me, and they didn't like the consequences. Our friendship continued through college and remains intact today. George's mother, whose maiden name was Gambini, belonged to the same Gambini family associated with the East Side. She had a desire to distance herself from the family's illegal activities, so they sent him to a regular high school and college. He pursued business and law as his majors, while I focused on business and accounting. Despite his mother's objections, he later joined the family business. As my investment firm prospered, I started handling their investments, which brought a sense of respectability to their financial endeavors. In return, I made a significant amount of money. George had always mentioned that he owed me a favor, and I eventually called in that favor when I learned about your professional tennis player. George assured me he could handle it, and soon, that player was no longer a concern. I became concerned when she appeared ill, so I fetched a bowl from the kitchen. Similar situations arose with your second and third lovers. Once you got involved with them, I made sure that Mike and Emma had a mother. If you hadn't considered leaving me, they would still be alive. She inquired with tears streaming down her face if it was my fault they were gone. I explained that I believed Tom was also deceased. However, I genuinely felt relief that she was leaving me for Tom. The kids were now in college and didn't need her. Tom was alive and waiting for her to join him. The look of relief on her face was quite something. Did she really think I'd confess to being rude to 3 men and let her off the hook? She asked why I hadn't simply let her go with Tom. I clarified that before she left, I wanted revenge. I reminded her of our little dog Fifi and how I always cared for her. The meat labeled for dogs only in the freezer came from her previous partners after their demise. So every time I saw Fifi do her business, it reminded me that her partners were nothing more than garbage. But that wasn't all. Glute and thigh muscles made great steaks, and she had even commented on how tasty they were when I grilled them. I asked her to think about the last time she had them. This time she actually threw up, but she missed the bowl on her dressing. I continued, telling her that now she knew. I pressed speed dial on my disposable phone, and two burly men entered through the front door. I informed her that these gentlemen would ensure her rendezvous with Tom, and she could spend the rest of her life with him, knowing she was accountable for the souls of her former lovers. I bid farewell to Peggy and expressed my hope that she would face the consequences. One of the two men grabbed Peggy's suitcases, while the other escorted her to the waiting car. She didn't utter another word, as promised. They spent the rest of their lives together, driving in Tom's car for precisely as long as it took to reach the bottom of the old quarry, 10 miles out of town. Now, they're all together in the same place, one cheating partner and 4 wife-stealing individuals. I love my life, and I have the proof that my beloved wife Peggy left me for another man.
On that significant day in August 2005, my friend, an 18-year-old high school graduate, burst into the door of our cozy 2-room apartment, and I couldn't believe my incredible luck. Her lifelong dream of becoming an actress had always seemed quite achievable to me, given her undeniable beauty and exceptional talent. This was unsurprising, considering her vibrant cheerleading background and active involvement in various school drama productions throughout her school years. With her whole future ahead of her, the acting profession appeared to be a reachable reality. While my girlfriend had always been resolute about pursuing a career as an actress, I was still contemplating the direction of my own life. I wasn't particularly interested in college and was content working at McDonald's, allowing my girlfriend to take the lead. However, that day marked a turning point. Filled with excitement, she shared the news that she had secured a minor role in a highly acclaimed blockbuster film. It was an incredible development. Though she only had 2 lines to deliver, it felt like a monumental step toward fulfilling her dream. She explained that the lead role in this fantastic opportunity was being played by a regular customer from Hooters restaurant. After promising her a role, and even booking a ticket to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I unquestionably believed in the opportunity that had arisen. Despite my naivety, I refrained from asking how she had managed to land such an incredible chance. In the evening, we gathered with friends to celebrate this momentous occasion. Each moment brought us closer to the allure and grandeur of Hollywood. Eager to have me accompany her on this journey, she reached out to a mysterious sponsor who generously purchased a ticket for me as well. Her happiness was infectious, and I had never seen her so elated before. Upon arriving in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we were met with opulence. Checking into a luxurious hotel for 4 days was a thrilling experience. While my girlfriend was occupied with her scenes for 2 of those days, I didn't mind. I made the most of the opportunity, soaking up the atmosphere of stunning beaches and basking in the warm sun. The remaining days felt like an uninterrupted vacation, filled with beach excursions, lively parties, and even encounters with celebrities involved in the film production. It was like a dream come true. All of this served as motivation that fueled our desire for the glamorous lifestyle that the film industry offered. Upon returning to Pennsylvania, we couldn't shake off the allure of that world. We knew that our path led to Los Angeles, where my friend could wholeheartedly pursue her dreams in the film industry. Her time in St. Vincent and the Grenadines had allowed her to forge valuable connections with influential individuals. Furthermore, she firmly believed that upon our return to Pennsylvania, we should use the $15,300 she earned to embark on this incredible journey. Using a portion of her earnings from the film, we managed to secure a modest apartment in Los Angeles, brimming with hope and anticipation. We were stepping into a new chapter of our lives. Days turned into months, and my girlfriend faced the challenging task of securing significant film roles in this bustling city. Every morning, she woke up early and attended auditions in the hope of achieving a long-awaited breakthrough. Unfortunately, she mainly came across minor roles in local business advertisements that offered meager compensation, falling short of our expectations. As her earnings from the movie role began to dwindle, we found ourselves needing to invest in new clothing and photographs for auditions. Recognizing the need to support ourselves, I decided to take a job at a fast food restaurant. It may not have been glamorous, but it provided us with the opportunity to start earning money and sustain our livelihood. As our savings dwindled, I witnessed her hopes and dreams gradually fade in her eyes. Every evening we returned home burdened by the weight of rejections and disappointments, as she came face to face with the harsh realities and fierce competition of the film industry in Los Angeles. In our small Pennsylvania town, she had been considered the epitome of beauty. But in this sprawling city, beauty was commonplace. Months turned into nearly a year, and she still couldn't secure a substantial role for herself. The clothing she bought was now secondhand, and prospects for advancement seemed uncertain. Eventually, she took a job as a shopping mall model, a significant departure from our lofty aspirations. Nevertheless, it allowed, albeit with difficulty, for the bills to be paid. During this period, I found my own path in life as a fitness trainer. Balancing two jobs, one at a restaurant and the other training numerous clients, I aimed to provide stability and support. Our lives were consumed by individual pursuits, and as a result, we seldom found time for each other. Our dreams of success in the entertainment industry appeared to be slipping away, overshadowed by the demands of our busy lives. With each passing day, our dreams seemed to grow more distant. The unforgiving nature of the film and entertainment industry began to wear down my girlfriend's spirit, and I could only helplessly watch as she confronted the harsh reality that achieving success in Hollywood was far from the easy dream we had once envisioned. As time passed, her excessive spending drained our finances completely, and we began to struggle to make ends meet. I became increasingly frustrated with her for depleting our savings at an alarming rate. Finally, we managed to replenish our depleted savings. It happened unexpectedly when I was rummaging through her purse searching for something and stumbled upon a bundle of $1,500. Intrigued, I couldn't help but inquire about where she had obtained such a large sum of money. She appeared flustered, but explained that a photographer she met at the mall had invited her to take pictures at his lavish mansion. I couldn't resist asking why she hadn't mentioned it earlier, to which she replied that she had intended to, but somehow forgot. Curiosity got the better of me, and I continued my questioning, wanting to ensure the legitimacy of her earnings. She assured me that everything was fine. However, as she spoke of her best photos and posing in various outfits for professional photographers, doubt began to creep into my mind. Despite our naive understanding of the industry, I couldn't ignore suspicions about the potential for exploitation or ulterior motives. After all, we had heard stories of people in Hollywood willing to pay exorbitant sums for almost anything. I grew curious and asked her to show me the photos. To my surprise, she mentioned that producers rarely provided copies, and it would take some time before anything would be known about the photo shoots. In my naivety, I accepted her explanation without delving deeper into the matter. This situation persisted for the next 2 years. She frequently returned home late at night, attributing it to earning money by frequenting clubs and occupying VIP seats. She often claimed that her involvement in these projects was limited to gatherings in the VIP section. In other instances, she explained that some producers preferred conducting auditions and shooting scenes during the nighttime. However, as her nocturnal escapades became more frequent, a sense of unease settled within me. Worries about her safety and the company she kept began to overwhelm me. She tried to allay my concerns, arguing that she wasn't the only one engaging in such activities, and that many of her friends were compensated similarly. But suspicions persisted in my mind, causing me to question the reality of her actions. Over time, I began to take notice of the company she was keeping, which primarily consisted of individuals typically associated with the adult film industry. Yet, in my naivety, I believed they were simply models. She defended herself by explaining that she had no control over her work schedule, as producers dictated her whereabouts and responsibilities. I tried to logically assess the situation, convincing myself that some producers might genuinely prefer nighttime shoots. All of this seemed to align logically with my limited understanding of the industry. One day, while taking a smoke break near our apartment, a pivotal moment occurred that shattered my illusions. A man in a large SUV pulled up and dropped her off right in front of our house. In that moment, my views on her nocturnal adventures were called into question, leaving me stunned. Shocked by what I witnessed, I couldn't muster the courage to immediately confront her. Instead, I went inside the house and discreetly observed her through the blinds as she entered. Anxiety gripped me at that moment. With a determined decision to uncover the truth about her activities, I secretly planned to follow her the next Friday when she went out. On that Friday, she went on a date with her friends, and I quietly began trailing her. In the end, she ended up at a club with a long line outside. To my surprise, the club's promoter granted my girlfriend and her friends special privileges, allowing them to bypass the long queue and enter the establishment swiftly. In my quest for answers, I reluctantly had to bribe a bouncer generously to gain entry. Inside the club, I carefully scanned the crowd, desperately searching for her. Finally, I spotted her in the VIP section, chatting animatedly and enjoying drinks with her friends. It seemed to match her earlier explanation, and I lingered there for a while. As I began to grow tired and prepare to leave, doubts about the man in the SUV still nagged at me. But those doubts quickly vanished when I realized it was just an Uber Black, and I felt foolish for suspecting betrayal. After scolding myself for being paranoid, I convinced myself that everything was fine and returned to my normal routine. At the time, I worked as a fitness trainer and also dabbled in multi-level marketing, selling dietary supplements and insurance. Thankfully, my average earnings covered rent and my living expenses. When I took charge of managing my own finances, I couldn't help but notice changes in my girlfriend's behavior and appearance. She became more secretive about her financial matters, which raised concerns for me. Occasionally, she displayed aggression toward me, only to apologize later, claiming it was unintentional. Furthermore, she started concealing her finances and paid less attention to her spending, leaving me questioning her financial habits. Despite initially trying to brush these concerns aside, I couldn't ignore the significant decline in her financial stability. She began losing a considerable amount of weight, hardly ate, showed signs of excessive nervousness, and experienced sleep problems. She often slept for extended periods, causing me to worry about her well-being. In my attempt to address her health issues, I made sure she ate properly, attributing her behavior to stress. However, one night as I woke up, I noticed she wasn't in our bed. Baffled, I followed the noise coming from the bathroom, driven by anxiety. To my horror, I discovered my girlfriend using a prohibited substance in the bathroom. I stumbled upon a stash of illegal substances which caught her by surprise. In a panic, she attempted to hide everything but ended up spilling it on the floor. Her desperate actions to salvage the substances resembled a beggar clutching at scattered money. It marked a turning point in our relationship. Overwhelmed by emotions, both of us broke down in tears. She sincerely apologized and pledged to seek help and undergo rehabilitation immediately. It felt as though she had journeyed to Los Angeles, but lost not only herself, but also our connection along the way. Unflinchingly addressing her issues, she bravely kept her promise and checked into a rehabilitation center the very next day. Throughout her month-long stay at the clinic, she displayed genuine remorse and determination, clinging to the hope of overcoming this dark phase and resurrecting her dream. When she completed her rehabilitation program and returned home, she appeared revitalized and filled with newfound strength and resolve. A wave of relief washed over me. Her return was particularly significant as my birthday approached. We had a tradition of going all out for each other's birthdays, always striving to outdo ourselves and create unforgettable celebrations. One day she came home, casually tossing her purse next to me, and went to the bathroom. Curiosity got the better of me, and a few days before my birthday, I decided to search her bag. To my astonishment, I stumbled upon a CD labeled Pilot, and excitement and anticipation surged through me. Without hesitation, I popped it into the DVD player, eager to discover its contents, anticipating it might be a surprise related to me, or perhaps footage of a screen test she attended. I was utterly shocked and filled with anger as the unexpected truth unfolded on the screen. The video showed my girlfriend engaging in intimate activities with another man. It was an image I could hardly fathom. Overwhelmed by emotions, I stormed into the bathroom where she was showering, venting my anger and demanding an immediate explanation for her involvement in such actions. As she emerged from the shower, I noticed she was trembling, and she offered heartfelt apologies. She admitted that what I witnessed was initially meant as a one-time encounter, but had spiraled out of control. I could scarcely comprehend her words. Confused and in search of clarity, I asked her how long she had been involved in this industry. Reluctantly, she confessed that it had been ongoing for over a year. My confusion deepened when she struggled to provide an exact count of how many times she had participated in such activities. Citing the frequency blurred the boundaries and made it hard to keep track. What struck me even more was that the dates and timestamps on the videos coincided with the period when I believed she was in a rehabilitation center seeking help, not pursuing adult films for financial gain. Determined to rebuild my life, I cut off all contact with my ex-girlfriend and focused on my career as a fitness trainer and my involvement in multi-level marketing. Unfortunately, the latter turned out to be a pyramid scheme that was eventually shut down by authorities, dashing my hopes. Undeterred, I decided to invest my savings in opening a gym. However, the high expenses in California posed a significant challenge. Opting to join the Planet Fitness franchise, I seized the opportunity to open a small gym in my Pennsylvania hometown before leaving California. Wanting to be transparent, I reached out to my ex-girlfriend to inform her of my departure. Despite our breakup 6 months earlier, our connection remained strong, and our phone conversations stirred up emotions in both of us. She spoke of feeling abandoned, emphasizing that I had brought her to California and then abandoned her when she needed me most. Her words left me speechless, and I found myself immersed in memories of our shared youth and the dreams we once held together. Having made the decision to return to my hometown, I took the initiative to establish the Planet Fitness Center. As the business began to thrive, I also found solace in close relationships that brought joy and fulfillment back into my life. However, over time I heard unsettling rumors that my ex-girlfriend had turned to a life of street-based solicitation to support her illegal substance use. Initially skeptical, I decided to investigate and discover the truth firsthand. What I uncovered left me utterly shocked. The person I once knew had become a mere shell, devoid of the vibrant soul I had cherished. About 2 years after the opening of my gym, the situation took an unexpected turn. Everything had been going smoothly for me. The membership at my gym kept growing and it seemed like life was on a positive trajectory. But then, an unexpected and devastating piece of news reached me. My ex-girlfriend had passed away while with a client, having consumed an excessive amount of a prohibited substance. The moment I received this heart-wrenching information, chills ran down my spine, and I rushed home. Unable to contain my emotions, I sat on the shower floor, overcome by uncontrollable grief and tears. To this day, I still carry guilt and never cease to wonder if I could have done something differently. Despite reassurances from my therapist, pain and regret continued to weigh heavily on my heart.
Before everything began to unravel, Bob had been living a life that seemed perfect from the outside. He had a stable career, a loving family, and the comfort that came with being settled in his mid-30s. Each day followed a predictable pattern: work, home, family time, and the occasional date night with his wife Sharon. It felt like they had found the formula for balancing responsibilities and squeezing out moments of happiness. At least that's what he believed. There were no glaring signs, no indicators that something was festering beneath the surface, something that could shatter the foundation he thought was rock solid. He should have known better. Bob and Sharon were not immune to the slow erosion that creeps into long-term relationships when neglect takes root. Bob had thrown himself into a massive project at work, one that promised to elevate his career and ensure their financial security for years to come. Late nights at the office and early mornings became routine, and he didn't give much thought to the growing distance between him and his wife. In his mind, this was just a temporary phase, a necessary sacrifice that would pay off in the end. What he failed to see was how the little things, missed dinners, forgotten conversations, and unspoken loneliness, were quietly eroding the bond they had built over the years. It was Thursday, and Bob found himself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a bottle of Miller Lite. He had only grabbed a six-pack, not enough to get drunk, just something to help him steady his nerves. He knew he needed a clear head for the conversation that was fast approaching. Upstairs, he could hear the sound of Sharon's music fading, a sign that she was nearly finished getting ready. Normally, Thursday nights were her time with friends, giving Bob the opportunity to stay late at work and finish up his weekly tasks. It had seemed like the perfect arrangement. Bob got a handle on his workload, Sharon had time to relax with her friends, and his parents looked after their daughter, Casey. But as he sat there now, the very routine that once seemed ideal had become a veil, hiding the deeper cracks in his marriage. His mind drifted back to his lunch with Vicky earlier that week, a conversation that had upended his entire reality. Tuesday. I need to get out of the office more, Bob thought, or at least see if they would deliver these amazing sandwiches. He had grabbed a table to watch the door and soon saw a familiar face walk in. She looked around and he waved. She spotted him and walked over. At 31, Vicky was the oldest of Sharon's friends and his favorite. She was also the only one married. She had a way of putting everyone at ease without being a pushover. He had to admit she was attractive too. Dark, wavy hair, fair skin, and great legs. No noticeable curves. but her face was stunning. Her husband Ron adored her, and she still got plenty of male attention. As she sat down across from him, he couldn't help but notice how easy she made everything feel. "Thanks for meeting me, Bob. I know work keeps you busy, so I appreciate you taking the time," she said, studying his face. "No problem, Vicky," Bob replied. "Though, I have to say, I feel a little weird meeting without Sharon. I don't usually have lunch with pretty women who aren't my wife, but you said it was about her, so I'm all ears. Planning a surprise for her birthday next month?" Bob wasn't expecting the sadness that crossed Vicky's face when he mentioned Sharon's birthday. What was going on? "Bob, I've seen how much you and Sharon care for each other, and that's why I'm coming to you. This might ruin my friendship with her, but if it saves your marriage, I'm okay with that. There's no easy way to say this, but Sharon's been seeing someone for the past 3 months." Bob was stunned. He thought it had to be a joke, and he told Vicky as much. "I'm really sorry, Bob, but it's not a joke. About 2 months ago, after you took on this new project, Sharon was in a bad place at work, grumpy and quiet. After a few martinis, she opened up about feeling abandoned. She said she missed you and felt like you two were becoming just another middle-aged couple letting life pass you by. At that point, the waiter came by for Vicky's order. She asked for a Cobb salad and an iced tea with lemon. Bob, still trying to process what he had just heard, was reeling at the thought that Sharon would sneak around after 8 years together. He would have bet his life that Sharon would have told him if she was unhappy. They'd always been honest, even when it was uncomfortable. He looked at Vicky and asked the one question he needed to know the answer to immediately. "Has she slept with him?" he whispered. "Not that I know of," Vicky replied. "And I think I'd be able to tell. Your wife's usually pretty open, which is why this behavior is so shocking. But Bob, you should know that every woman I've spoken to has shared similar feelings, kind of like how you guys talk about being tied down. When Sharon mentioned it, we all told her she's amazing, that you should pay more attention to her, and so on. Unfortunately, my sister was there that night," Vicky continued. "What does your sister have to do with anything?" Bob asked, trying to control his anger. "Well, my sister is not the best influence," Vicky said. The waiter, bringing her tea, raised an eyebrow at her comment. Vicky took a sip and explained, "My parents were serial cheaters. I don't know who started it, but they were always trying to get back at each other. When I was 17, I asked why they stayed together, and they said it was because they loved each other. This affected my sister and me differently. I saw cheating as a relationship butcher, while my sister thought it was fine as long as you loved each other. I love her, but she's clueless about this stuff." "Anyway," Vicky continued, "my sister made a comment that if Sharon wasn't getting romance at home, maybe she should look elsewhere. I told her she was wrong, but a few others in the group started talking about how to pick up a guy and keep it secret. At the time, Sharon said she'd never cheat on you, but I think my sister planted a seed." "Why do you think that?" Bob asked. Now that he wasn't sure Sharon had slept with someone, he was processing more. "Because the next week, Luke Jonas and his group showed up at the Red Horse Saloon where we were drinking. Sharon didn't invite him, but she did tell him we'd be there trying line dancing. It was fun, except for Luke." Now Bob had a name. Knowledge is power. "Tell me about this Luke guy," Bob growled. Vicky smiled slightly at the tone in Bob's voice. She continued, "Luke Jonas is the office flirt. He goes after any woman who shows even the slightest interest, and those who do find themselves on the receiving end of his attention. He doesn't care if they're married or even particularly attractive. He just loves the chase. Your wife shut him down early on, and he didn't push it until recently. Now he's chasing her, and instead of stopping it, she's running along with it. It's an open secret that if Luke gets one more maltreatment complaint, he'll be fired. She could easily end it, but she hasn't. In fact, for the past couple of months, they've been regulars at the cafeteria, sitting together, whispering and giggling. I've tried talking to her about it, but she just gets defensive, insisting they're just friends and that Luke listens to her and understands her problems. I asked if she would act the same way if you were sitting across the table, and she actually blushed. Then she got angry and said something like, 'You wouldn't even notice.' After that, I decided to step back and keep an eye on things. They seemed to cool it off at work, and I thought it was over until 3 weeks ago." At this point, Vicky's lunch arrived, and she began eating, watching Bob for his reaction. Bob took a long sip of his lemonade, but it didn't register at all. He felt hollow inside, and his eyes wouldn't focus. How could Sharon think he wouldn't care about her flirting with another man? He had never been overly jealous because he loved and trusted his wife. But now he wondered if he had been that distant because of this work project. He had always thought the payoff would be worth it, but had he gone too far? He found himself wondering what had happened 3 weeks ago. Did he even want to know? They ate in silence for about 5 minutes while Bob tried to process everything she had said. He was angry, no doubt. There was no good reason for her to be so close to another man, but he could almost see her logic. Maybe if he had been more attentive, none of this would have happened. And other than not telling him about the flirting, she hadn't technically lied to him. Yes, there were lies of omission, but so far, it was something he could work past. He figured they could talk, and if she was honest and agreed to stop seeing Luke, they could move on. So far, it didn't seem like any lasting damage had been done, unless something had happened in the last 3 weeks. So, what happened 3 weeks ago? How bad is it? He asked, feeling like he was finally standing on more solid ground. He could handle this. Vicky looked at him sympathetically. This is where it gets tough, Bob. 3 weeks ago, we all went back to the Red Horse Saloon for line dancing. Luke and his guys showed up, and we were all having a good time. Sharon had been drinking more than usual. Luke kept buying her drinks, and she got pretty tipsy. I went to the bathroom with her, and when she came out of the stall, she was holding her underwear and put them in her purse. I asked her what she was doing, and she said she wanted to feel free. She was drunk, so I just brushed it off and helped her back to our table. I started rounding up Hannah and Gail to take Sharon back to my place so she wouldn't go home too drunk. But then I noticed Sharon and Luke on the dance floor, bumping and grinding. Line dancing was over, and the jukebox was playing. I saw her take her underwear out of her purse and put them in Luke's pocket as the song ended. Unfortunately, so did everyone else. The whole bar erupted with catcalls, and Luke was grinning like a Cheshire cat. Then he kissed her, almost a full-on kiss, and one of his friends was filming it on his phone. I wanted so badly for her to push him away, but she didn't. She went along with it. I'm so sorry, Bob. She stopped as she saw his reaction. Bob's jaw had literally dropped. He needed to get out of there. Excuse me for a second, bathroom, he muttered, standing up and walking away. Inside the bathroom, Bob locked the door and splashed water on his face. He gripped the sink tightly, trying to steady himself. He remembered that night. Sharon usually got home around 11:30, but that night it was closer to 2:30. Vicky had called earlier and said that Sharon was staying at her place because she'd had too much to drink and that they would call her a cab when she sobered up. It had happened before, and Bob had always been grateful that Vicky and the girls were responsible enough to avoid a DUI. He had never been upset about it. In fact, he had always thought getting a little drunk was part of the fun when going out with friends. He never imagined this. He also remembered what happened the night Sharon came home. He recalled being woken up by the warmth of Sharon's lips on his skin. It had caught him off guard, and before he knew it, they were fully involved in passionate sex. "Oh my God, honey, that was amazing," he had told her afterward. "I'm sorry it ended so quickly, but I'll make it up to you." She had giggled and continued, and the night became one of their best. But now those memories were tainted. Was she thinking about someone else during those moments? He splashed more water on his face, trying to rid himself of the thought. Damn, he thought. Was she thinking of him while we were having sex? He dried his face and returned to the table. He noticed the sympathetic look on Vicky's face, but didn't know how to respond. His sandwich remained untouched. "What else do I need to know, Vicky?" he asked, his voice emotionless. "Honestly, Bob, that's pretty much it. The last few girls' nights have been at Hannah's house with wine and lingerie parties. At work, Sharon's been acting cold toward Luke, even though he's still trying to get close to her. I thought it was over, but just yesterday I saw them talking. They got quiet when I came around the corner, so I don't know what's going on, but I'm done. I figured you should know, and maybe you can do something since she's not listening to her friends anymore." The waiter brought the check, and Bob grabbed it before Vicky could reach for it, pulling out his credit card. "I want to see them together in action and maybe put a stop to it," he said. "Sharon told me you guys are going to the Red Horse Saloon this week, so this Thursday when you all go, I'll show up and watch from a distance." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the horrified look on Vicky's face. "What did I say wrong?" he asked, confused. "Bob, Hannah has a doctor's appointment early Friday morning, and Gail's flying to Florida to visit her brother. If Sharon's going out Thursday, it's not with us," Vicky said gently. She reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm really sorry, honey," she said softly. "I know it's pointless to ask if you're okay, but here's my home number. Call anytime if you need to talk to me or Ron. Her husband was a marriage counselor, so talking to him might be helpful. Bob nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me, Vicky. I know it wasn't easy, but I think you're doing the right thing being a good friend. I don't know what's going to happen next, but at least now I know what's going on and I can take some action. Thanks again. With that, he stood up, signed the bill, and walked out. Wednesday. Today was a breakthrough on the project Bob had been working on. They had secured pre-manufactured parts from a startup in Harrisburg, shaving 2 months off the timeline, giving them at least a week's cushion even with logistical challenges. A couple more calls, and the project would be completed 2 months ahead of schedule, saving the military millions. The bonus would be as big as Bob had hoped, and having his name on the project would bring recognition. He should have felt as happy as could be. But instead, all he could think about was how much he dreaded going home and confronting what he had to. He had decided to investigate Sharon's potential affair himself. He couldn't access her work email, but figured they wouldn't be foolish enough to use that since it was monitored by HR. He logged into her Yahoo account but found nothing suspicious. She could have created another email, but he wouldn't know unless he checked the home computer. The problem was that Bob wasn't tech-savvy. The idea of setting up surveillance cameras or voice-activated microphones seemed cool in theory, but he already had a plan for confronting her. All he wanted was as much information as possible to figure out whether he should try to save or end his marriage. Sharon had already picked up their daughter, Casey, from his parents and had talked him into picking up Chinese food for dinner. When he texted her asking what she wanted, her response was, "After 10 years together, 8 of those married, you should know what I like, babe." He couldn't resist poking a little. "I just wanted to make sure you're still happy with the way things are," he texted back. Her reply came quickly. "You're right. Get me an extra egg roll." If it weren't for the bombshell Vicky dropped yesterday, Bob would have been thrilled to get home an hour early and just spend time with his wife and daughter. But when he checked the clock, he reminded himself that before the project began, this time would have been considered 2 hours late. He also realized he hadn't been home early on a Friday in months. Add to that the exhaustion and stress he'd been feeling, and it wasn't hard to see why Sharon might have felt neglected. Still, that didn't give her the right to do what she was doing. Walking through the front door, he noticed Sharon reaching up for a wine bottle. He paused to admire her figure. At 31, she was in her prime. Her 5'7" frame had just the right amount of curves to be irresistible. Even through the bulky sweatpants she wore, he could see the outline of her toned figure. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, and when she turned and flashed him that bright smile, he couldn't help but feel incredibly lucky. Then he remembered why he was upset. "I'm so glad you're home, babe. How's work?" she asked, walking over to kiss him on the lips. "Pretty good. We had a major breakthrough on some supplies, so we're likely finishing at least a month ahead of schedule. Look, I know I've been distant because of this project, and I hate that I can't share the details since it's classified, but I want you to know, you and Casey are the most important things in my life, and I'll do everything I can to protect us," he said, looking into her eyes. Did he just catch a glimpse of regret or guilt in her expression, or was he imagining things? He cursed his inability to read people better. Known as a straight shooter, he spoke plainly and expected others to do the same. His blunt approach sometimes came off as abrasive, but once people got to know him, they appreciated his honesty. It had worked for him for 34 years, but now he was starting to doubt his method. "Oh, honey," she said softly, "we both love you so much and understand. I just wish you could be more involved with the family, but I know this is temporary. It means so much to hear you say that, though." She smiled, and for a moment he thought he saw tears in her eyes. Was she really that good of an actress? "So what does finishing early mean for you?" she asked as she unpacked the food containers. "Well, first off, it means a nice bonus. I don't know the exact amount yet, but it's definitely not chump change. Plus, since this is our first government project, doing it so well should bring in more work for the company. My name being on the lead will get attention from headhunters in the government, and the bosses know this, so I should be able to negotiate some good perks, assuming everything goes smoothly." As he talked, he tried eating his sweet and sour pork with chopsticks but gave up and grabbed a fork. "Haven't I mentioned all this before?" he asked, his mouth full. "Not that I remember, babe," she replied. "All I recall is you saying you had a big contract you couldn't talk about, but it'd be worth it." "Well, it seems I haven't really talked to you since then," he said, sounding a little sad. But it looks like I'll have my husband back soon, she said with a bright smile. He looked at her, ready to fish for more information. So, what bar are you and the girls hitting tomorrow night? Should I swing by after work to make sure everyone gets home safely? He asked, trying to keep his tone light. Oh, actually, we're going to the Red Horse Saloon for some line dancing. I think we'll be done before you're off work, she said, focusing on her orange chicken as she spoke. His heart sank a little more. At that moment, Casey finished her egg roll and asked him to read her a story. He cleaned off his plate, then scooped her up and carried her to the living room. For the next hour, he devoted himself to reading story after story until she was fast asleep. He heard snoring from the couch and saw Sharon curled up with a book in her lap. He gently picked up his daughter and took her upstairs to her room, tucking her in and fighting back tears as he thought about what was to come. He wanted Casey to remember the good nights with her parents, not the tough times ahead. Wiping away his tears, he returned downstairs, kissed Sharon gently on the lips, and pulled a blanket over her. Then, determined, he went looking for her phone. He found it plugged in on the nightstand. Swiping to unlock it, he quickly found what he was looking for. Scrolling back through her texts, he saw they began about 3 months ago. Hey, pretty lady. It was fun seeing you girls out dancing last night, one message read. Same here. Bob works late on Thursdays, and my in-laws watch the kids so we can have some girl time, she had replied. Your hubby is a good guy for letting you get out of the house now and then. Yes, he is great, she responded. For the next few weeks, the texts between them seemed harmless enough. Then, this exchange happened. Vicky gave me a lecture today about our lunch breaks. I was mad, but she had a point. I don't want people to get the wrong idea about us. It's just harmless talking. We're not doing anything wrong, he replied. She asked if Bob would be okay with how we're acting, and that got me thinking. Maybe we're sending the wrong signals. Plus, I shouldn't be sharing all my problems with another guy. I'm going to try talking to Bob. I get it. But if you can't get his attention, you know where to find me. I'll even buy you dinner if needed. Just as friends. Bob didn't remember Sharon trying to talk to him about anything, but it could have been around the time he found out they needed food-grade stainless steel for the project. He had spent days tracking down a supplier, and during that time you could have dropped a bomb on him without him noticing. So far, the text from Sharon seemed innocent, but it was clear to Bob that Luke was playing her. How could she not see it? He scrolled further to the next set of messages. You need to return those today, said the man. She replied with a smiley face emoji. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I mean, he responded. My friends are mad at me right now, and I don't blame them. If Bob finds out how I've been acting, he might leave me, she confessed. So, you don't want me to show him the video? He asked, including another smiley face emoji. What video? You can't let anyone at work see that. Sam was there, and he recorded it on his phone, she explained, worried. I'll make sure he deletes it, but you'll owe me, he warned with another smiley face. Fine. I can't lose Bob. Not after last night, she admitted. Curious, he asked, what happened last night? That's none of your business, she snapped. Was he mad you came home late and drunk? LOL, he teased. Hell no. Let's just say last night was incredible, and it's because Bob and I love each other. Now give me my underwear back and make sure that video gets erased, she demanded. Damn, that makes me sound so bad. Bob deserves better than me. He reassured her. No, he's lucky to have you. He wasn't there to keep an eye on you. I don't need anyone watching me. Just be the friend you say you are and handle what I asked, please, she insisted. Of course, I'll help you. Then you can buy me dinner, he replied with yet another smiley face. Just make sure no one sees that video, and I'll do whatever you want, she reluctantly agreed. A few days later, the conversation resumed. I heard girls' night was canceled. How about that dinner? He texted, including a smiley face. Not a good idea. Sorry, she replied. Oh, come on. Your hubby will be at work and your friends are busy. One night out with a friend and we can talk like we used to. Besides, you owe me, he persisted, adding another smiley face. Fine, I'll meet you at the Red Horse at 8, she agreed. Nope, he corrected with a smiley face. Meet me at the TGIF in the Sheraton Hotel. They have great drink specials and I don't want to yell over a bunch of drunks. I'll be getting a room in case we drink too much. Fine, she conceded, but this is just friends having dinner, and I do owe you for making sure that video didn't get out. It's bad enough people at work heard about it. Don't worry about it. I watched Sam delete the video, and soon someone else will do something scandalous, and no one will remember. See you at 8, he assured her. And there it was. the probable end of his marriage. How many times do you see your wife agree to meet another man at a hotel restaurant? How could this possibly end well? She couldn't think Zex wasn't on the table. Bob closed out the texts and plugged the phone back into the charger. He undressed and got into bed alone. Sleep didn't come easily. On Thursday, Sharon came downstairs wearing her little black dress, the one she always wore on their dates. She looked stunning. She stopped when she saw him sitting at the table. "Oh, Bob, I didn't expect you home this early," she said, her voice shaky. She looked pale. "We need to talk, Sharon," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "This is probably the most important conversation we'll ever have. Please sit down." She sat, fear spreading across her face. She reached for his hand as she usually would, but he pulled it away. "I know there's no girls' night. I know you've been seeing Luke Jonas behind my back," he started. "Bob, please, let me explain," she began, but he slammed his fist on the table, cutting her off. "Damn it, Sharon, listen to me," he yelled, making her flinch. "You don't get to talk until I'm done." She shrank back, tears filling her eyes. "As I was saying, I know you've been cozying up to Luke at lunch. I know you've been dancing with him at the Red Horse Saloon. I know you took off your underwear and gave them to him after some dirty dancing. I know the only reason you jumped me 3 weeks ago was because you were worked up over him. And I know you plan to go on a date with him tonight at a hotel where your boyfriend has a room ready." He paused, trying to control his anger. "Sharon, you lied to me by omission about Luke. You lied by omission about your dancing without underwear, and you lied about going out with the girls. Honestly, I'm tired, and my trust in you is broken. I'm not even sure I want to work on this marriage anymore. Your actions make me feel like you don't care about this relationship either, so I'm giving you 3 choices." He held up one finger. "Choice 1, you walk out that door and go see your boyfriend. Even if nothing happens tonight, this will end our marriage. 0 chance I'll want to fix it." He raised a second finger. "Choice 2, you and I sit here all night, and you try to convince me to work on saving our marriage. You've got a hard sell because I don't trust a word you say anymore, but you might be able to pull it off. I love you, and we have a child, so you've got about a 50% chance." Then he raised a third finger. "Choice 3, you take me to see your Romeo tonight. You tell him, in front of me, that he is never to contact or speak to you again. Then you let me talk to him alone for at least 15 minutes. This choice will earn you the most respect and give us the best chance at fixing things. If you haven't slept with or done anything sexual with him, I promise I'll be 100% in to work on this. But if you have, this is the only option that might still give us a shot at repairing things." She looked like she might throw up, staring at him in horror. 0, 50, or 100%, Sharon? What's it going to be?" The question hung in the air for almost a minute. She looked as if she was struggling to hold back the urge to vomit before finally meeting his gaze. "Bob, I'm so sorry for everything, and I really need to talk to you. But in answer to your question, do you want to drive or should I?" she asked, her voice small but steady. That was unexpected. He hadn't thought she would choose to confront Luke with him. He figured she'd try to stay and make excuses. This choice earned her some points, but she was still deep in the red. "I'll drive," Bob said shortly, grabbing his keys and following her out to the car. He opened the door for her out of habit, and she almost broke down again. As they pulled out of the driveway, she glanced over at him. "I really messed us up, didn't I?" she asked quietly. "Yes, Sharon, you really did," Bob replied, eyes focused on the road. "What can I do to fix it?" she asked, her voice trembling. He thought for a moment. "First, complete honesty from now on. I shouldn't have to say this, but apparently you think it's okay to leave out important things or lie to me. You'll also have to find a way to make me believe you, because I don't know how you're going to earn my trust back, and I'm not the one who broke it." She nodded, biting her lip as tears welled in her eyes. "And another thing," Bob continued, "if we stay together, Luke is out of your life entirely. You don't talk to him at work. You don't ask how he's doing. If you see him at a bar, you leave. If you can't leave, you call me. No drinks, no gifts, nothing from him. He's gone." "Okay," she whispered. "When we get back, you're going to tell me everything. Even the things you think I don't want to hear. I've been wrapped up in this project, and I'll take some blame for that. If you have issues with me, you need to tell me, but no more hiding." "Okay," she said, her voice barely audible. "And one more thing. For now, we're going to marriage counseling. You can pick the counselor if you want. Hell, maybe Ron can suggest someone. But it's not negotiable if we want any shot at making this work." "Okay," she repeated, nodding. Her phone beeped with a text message. She looked at it, and her face went pale again. It's him. He's asking where I am, she said softly. Bob held out his hand for the phone. Wordlessly, she handed it over. He scrolled through the messages from earlier that day. Hey, I got a room with a jacuzzi. Maybe after dinner we can relax. Bring your bikini. You're not getting me drunk enough to go in a hot tub with you. I'm not bringing a bikini. We'll see. You know how you get when you're drunk. The most recent message. Where are you? I got a glass of wine waiting for you. Bob texted back. Running a little late, I got a surprise for you. The response came quickly. You brought your bikini? Awesome. Bob handed the phone back to Sharon. She read the messages and hung her head. You know this isn't helping, right? Just from today's texts, it looks like you were planning to hook up with him tonight. How bad do you think it'll be if I scroll back further? Bob asked, his voice calm but cutting. Sharon sobbed quietly. Bob, I swear, I only planned to have dinner. I never planned to sleep with him. Did you plan to give him your underwear like you did a few weeks ago when you were drunk and dancing with him? He asked, his words like a knife. She paled even more. Sharon, we're almost there. You should probably fix your makeup and think about what you're going to say to Luke, Bob advised. Oh, and don't drink the wine. Sharon quickly pulled down the visor and grabbed a tissue from the glove box. She began fixing her makeup, sniffling as she tried to compose herself. In a more steady tone, she asked, Bob, I get why you think Luke was playing me. Hearing it from you makes me realize he probably was. But how didn't I see it? I know I've made bad decisions lately, but I'm not some naive girl. I've brushed off better-looking and more charming guys than Luke, so why did he get to me? That's part of why I find it hard to trust anything you say, Sharon. You're smart and beautiful. You should have recognized this for what it was. That's why I wonder if you went along with it willingly. I messed up, she muttered. I acted like a strumpet at a bar with him and lied about dinner tonight. No wonder you're angry and hurt. Her color seemed to return, and her voice grew stronger. Okay, I screwed up, and now I need to figure out how to fix it. Thank you for giving me a chance. She leaned in to kiss him, but he turned his head, and her kiss landed on his cheek. I'm far from over this, not even close, Bob said coldly. She looked at him, hurt. They were usually affectionate, and his rejection stung. What do you want me to say to him? She asked, her voice trembling as they pulled into the restaurant parking lot. Bob turned off the engine and looked at her, his anger bubbling up as he leaned in, staring at her with a cold intensity. What do I want you to say, Sharon? Our relationship is hanging by a thread because of what you did with this loser. You've torn down a key part of our marriage. Our daughter could be spending Thanksgiving with you and Christmas with me. I want that to sink in. Then, say whatever you need to. Sharon sat in silence for a minute, taking deep breaths before she opened the car door. As they walked toward the Sheraton Hotel's TGI Fridays, she hesitated for a moment, almost reaching for his arm. Bob didn't pull away, but he didn't invite her touch either. They entered the restaurant together in silence. Inside, a young hostess with auburn hair greeted them. Welcome to TGI Fridays, just the two of you? Sharon answered before Bob could. Actually, we're meeting someone. He's already seated. Feel free to look around, the hostess replied. Sharon nudged Bob's arm, gesturing toward the back. Bob followed her lead, his eyes narrowing as they spotted Luke in a corner near the door leading to the hotel lobby. Luke was fiddling with his phone, unaware they were approaching. Sharon walked ahead, stopping at Luke's table without sitting down. Luke looked up and grinned, but the smile faded quickly when he saw Bob behind her. His expression tightened and his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Luke, Sharon began, her voice shaking slightly. This is my husband, Robert Morgan. He has concerns about our relationship, and after talking to him, I agree. For the first time in our marriage, I've given him a reason to doubt me, and I'm going to work to fix what I've damaged. From now on, I want nothing to do with you. Don't call, text, or try to contact me in any way. I take responsibility for letting things go this far, but I'm ending it here. Luke sat silently, his face tight as Sharon continued. My husband knows about what happened at the Red Horse Saloon, and tomorrow, I'm reporting this to HR. Any attempt to contact me outside of work will be considered maltreatment. Now, I'm going to sit at the bar while my husband talks to you. Before Bob could respond, Sharon leaned in and gave him a firm kiss on the lips, her eyes pleading as she whispered, I'm so sorry. She then turned and walked toward the bar. Bob couldn't help but admire her resolve, though his feelings remained conflicted. Bob sat down across from Luke, who shifted uncomfortably, trying to keep his cool. Bob could see the nervousness underneath. So, Bob began in a calm, low voice, you were expecting a nice dinner with my wife. Maybe something extra afterward, huh? His cold stare locked onto Luke's eyes. Luke leaned back, attempting a smirk. I guess she didn't tell you everything, he said, trying to regain control. Bob smiled faintly, unshaken. She told me enough. And you thought tonight's surprise would be her in a bikini, right? Luke's smirk faltered briefly. He quickly tried to recover. You really think she's told you everything, man? He asked, trying to sound confident. Bob didn't flinch. Yeah, I do. I've known her for 10 years and been married for 8. I know her a lot better than some lowlife who's been sniffing around for a few months. Luke chuckled, trying to provoke him. She gives a hell of a head, he sneered, smirking again. Bob's expression remained calm. He leaned in slightly, his voice steady and dangerous. You want to show me proof? If you had anything real, you wouldn't have needed to spike her drink. Luke's smirk vanished completely. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to the glass of wine on the table, the one he had ordered for Sharon. Bob noticed and kept pressing. Yeah, I saw that, Bob continued. What was the plan? GHB? Rohypnol? Or just some good old magic pills? Luke's face turned pale as he leaned back, clearly shaken. Bob had hit a nerve. You little piece of trash, Bob hissed, leaning in closer. I should knock you to a pulp right now, but I'm not sure I wouldn't eliminate you, and I have better things to do than go to jail for someone like you. Luke stayed silent, his confidence completely shattered. I'm giving you 3 options, Bob said, raising one finger. Option 1, you apologize to my wife. Quit your job tomorrow and leave town. Do that, and I won't come after you. He raised another finger. Option 2, you walk into the police station and confess to pilling my wife's drink. Do your time, and when you get out, leave town. I'll keep an eye on you, but I won't come after you. He raised a third finger. Option 3, we meet in a boxing ring in 4 weeks, sign injury waivers, and neither of us leaves until one of us is unconscious. Then you leave town. Luke blinked, his eyes widening. You're insane, he spat, regaining a bit of his swagger. Why would I agree to any of that? Bob leaned back, taking a long sip from the scotch he had just ordered. Because every time you step outside at night, go to your car, or open your door, you'll wonder if I'm there, waiting. And when I'm not, you'll wonder if one of my friends is. You'll never know when it's coming, but trust me, it will. Knees, bats. You get the idea. Luke shifted uncomfortably, the smugness draining from his face. You wouldn't do that, he muttered, trying to regain his nerve. You're just a teddy bear. Your wife said so after I screwed her. Bob's calm demeanor vanished. He reached across the table, grabbed Luke by the collar, and pulled him forward to make his point clear. It wasn't aggressive, but it was enough to get his attention. You son of a witch, Luke shrieked, clutching his nose. I'm calling the cops. Go ahead, Bob growled. I'd love for them to test that wine glass for pills and hear the recording I've got of you admitting your plan. Luke's face turned ashen. Within minutes, the police were involved. 2 state troopers, who had been eating across the street, came in to investigate. Bob gave his statement, and they bagged the wine glass for evidence. A search of Luke's pockets turned up a small packet of white powder. When confronted, Luke asked for a lawyer and shut up. It was nearly 4 a.m. by the time Bob and Sharon left the police station. After giving her statement, Sharon spent 15 minutes listening to one of the officers explain how lucky she was that Bob had intervened. By the time they left, she was a wreck. Luke remained in custody. Using Sharon's phone, they called Bob's parents, briefly explaining the situation. His parents were understanding and promised to take care of Casey for the day, planning a trip to the zoo to keep her entertained. When they finally pulled into the garage, both Bob and Sharon sat quietly for a moment. Sharon unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned over the console, hugging Bob tightly. He let her cry into his shoulder for a moment, before gently pushing her back. Sharon, he said softly, we still need to talk, but it's late, and we need some sleep. Tomorrow, we'll call into work and figure out where we go from here. Sound like a plan? She nodded quickly, wiping her tears. Yes, Bob, bed sounds wonderful. Her voice cracked as she asked, Can I please sleep in the bed with you? Bob looked at her and sighed. Of course, baby. I woke up the next morning, spooned up next to my wife. As I thought about everything that had happened, I started to feel like maybe we could be okay. But there were still some tough conversations ahead before I could commit to anything. We went out for breakfast at IHOP and chatted about Casey and the fun she was likely having with my parents. We kept things light and easy. After a final cup of coffee, we paid the bill and headed home. Sitting down at the kitchen table, I looked at her and decided to get things started. "Okay, I'll go first," I said. "I think you can see what kind of person Luke is now, so I'm not going to knock that dead horse. But he said you gave him a good head and that you called me a teddy bear after sleeping with him. Is any of that true?" "No," she replied quickly. "The worst thing I did with him was that night at the Red Horse. I know what I did was terrible, but nothing else happened beyond that." "How can I trust you on that? You lied about seeing him last night, you left out what happened at the bar, and you hid your relationship with him," I said, feeling the need to lay all the cards on the table. "I've been thinking about how to earn back your trust, and I have an idea. What about a polygraph test?" she suggested. "Polygraph test?" I had to smile a little. "You mean a lie detector test?" She nodded. "Make an appointment and ask me whatever you need to. Just tell me the time and place," she said with such sincerity, it almost made me smile. I knew lie detector tests weren't 100% reliable, but I would feel better if she passed. "I'll see what I can do. It might take some time to set up, but that's actually a good idea," I replied, impressed she had thought of it. She smiled slightly. "Okay, that's a good start, and we can revisit the details of your affair later. But here's the big question, the one that hurts the most and affects our relationship the most. How do we move forward? I get that you were ashamed and didn't tell me about the panty incident. I don't like it, but I can understand it. It's harder for me to accept how close you got with another guy without telling me, but if you thought it was just a work friendship, I can see that too. What I can't understand and what breaks my heart is when you told me you were going out with the girls but were actually meeting him for dinner. That was a 100% lie. Forget the consequences. You broke my heart when you lied to me." "I know," she said, her eyes filling with tears. I could feel the weight of what she was saying. "Bob, all I can do is explain where my head was at the time. First, I want to say I'm deeply sorry for lying to you about everything. When you took on this project, for the first time in our relationship, I felt like I was second place. I'm not blaming you or your work. I understand why you took it and why it mattered to you. I'm just telling you how I felt. I started feeling down, and then Vicky's sister made a comment that I couldn't shake. She said to find romance somewhere else. I didn't take it as a suggestion to cheat, but I interpreted it as permission to seek what I was missing elsewhere while you were focused on work. Then came Luke," she continued. "Without realizing it, he started filling that gap. He asked about my day, about our kid, about things I liked. Our conversations were about me, and it made me feel special." She paused, studying my face, but I didn't react. "When Vicky called me out on how it looked at lunch, I realized what I had been doing. I was using Luke to get what I wasn't getting from you. So I cooled things off. At the time, I thought he was just being a friend, but I was trying to fix things with you." She paused again. "That night, things got out of hand. I didn't invite him or his friends. I showed up early, and they arrived before the other girls. Luke bought drinks for everyone, including me. I ended up getting drunk, drunker than I've been in years. I did some really stupid and shameful things, which you already know about, but afterward we had amazing sex, and that confused me even more. How could I act like a mess and still have such a great night with you?" She got up, grabbed a glass of water, drank half of it, then sat back down. "After that, it was all about damage control. I knew you'd be furious if you found out what I'd done, and you'd have every right to be. If you had kissed another woman at a bar while drunk, I'd be livid. It didn't help that we had such a great night afterward. You'd probably wonder if I was thinking of someone else. So I made another mistake. I tried to use Luke to cover it up, and he made sure I knew he was helping. Then, I owed him a favor, and he wanted to take me out to dinner on a night when my usual friends couldn't make it. I was still lonely, and I didn't think you'd be home until late. So in a moment of stupidity, I messed up again. I'm so sorry. Our marriage has always been built on trust, and I broke that trust." Tears were streaming down her face, though she wasn't sobbing. "Oh, hell," I muttered, standing up to give her a hug. I kissed her deeply, then pulled back. "We're not there yet. This is going to take some time, but if you're 100% in, so am I." Sharon and I went to counseling for a while, which really helped me work through my issues. The biggest thing I learned was that just because communication was great when we first got together, didn't mean we didn't need to keep working on it. The counselor also suggested Sharon get checked for a hormonal imbalance. 31 is a bit young for that, but it's not unheard of. After a few tests and a change in her birth control, she felt a lot better. I can't say we're back to where we were, but we're back to a good place. The polygraph test showed she was telling the truth about the tough questions I asked. I still have a little voice in the back of my mind about the accuracy of those tests, but I can live with that. I also signed up for boxing lessons. Sharon got into self-defense classes at the same gym, and Thursday Girls Bar Night turned into Thursday Girls Self-Defense Night. Sharon eventually signed us up for martial arts classes together. She's a natural, and I'm just trying to keep up. Sparring has become some of the best foreplay we've had. My project finished 6 weeks ahead of schedule and under budget. The company's now competing with the big players for government contracts. They tried to promote me to vice president, but it required too much travel, so I turned it down. Instead, I started a special projects division, which came with a new office and an executive assistant. My new executive assistant has the best smile and an amazing backside. So far, no one's complained about me working with my wife. As long as we're making money, I don't think anyone will. Most of my $38,000 bonus from that project went into Casey's college fund, but I kept some aside for a week at an all-inclusive resort with Sharon. By the time we got back, my parents were more than ready to hand our daughter back to us. I did get a misdemeanor attack charge for punching Luke. Best $300 and 40 hours of community service I've ever spent. Luke got 3 to 5 years for attempted attack and pill possession. The white powder was GHB. He also got the crap knocking out of him one night walking to his car. No, it wasn't me. Apparently, Luke had pulled this pilling stunt before, and one of his sufferer's brothers caught up with him. That guy got 2 to 3 years for felony attack. I put $50 a month into his commissary account. Sharon and I worked hard on rebuilding the trust that was damaged. And while it hasn't been easy, we've made significant progress. Our relationship now is stronger because we're both committed to making it work, openly communicating, and ensuring that no gap grows between us again. Therapy has become a regular part of our lives, and we've found a new rhythm that works for both of us. I can't say the fear is completely gone, but I've learned to trust again. Life isn't perfect, but it feels more genuine, more grounded. We both know that maintaining a relationship takes effort, and now we're giving it the attention it deserves. I wake up every morning next to the woman I love, knowing that we've both made mistakes, but also knowing that we're choosing each other every day. That, more than anything else, gives me hope for the future. At the end of the day, sometimes love is messy, but it's the fight to stay together that proves its strength.